Chapter 555. Completely defenseless, Jays was instantly struck. He felt as if the gentle glow of the gem was about to suck him in. His pupils slowly dilated and finally lost focus completely. He was like a walking corpse, completely without the ability to think. Seeing this scene, the silent Bosha hurriedly covered her mouth, her entire body twitching up and down as she desperately tried not to laugh. She simply felt sad for this swindler. He had actually provoked an extremely dangerous person without even knowing it, and even tried to make a huge profit from it. Now, not only did he not get the item, he even threw himself into the trap. How laughable! Seeing the last trace of consciousness disappear from Jaze's eyes, Andre immediately revealed a playful expression. He then asked the halfling beside him, "Tell me, what should we do next? Should we take this guy away and find a place to slowly interrogate him, or should we just deal with him here? I really didn't expect him to be so stupid, not having the slightest awareness of supernatural forces. He actually fell for it so quickly, and the methods I prepared later didn't even have time to be put to use." Haha, do you really expect these swindlers to be able to distinguish magical items like you? Don't joke around. At most, they can barely estimate the price. They'll have to sell it off sooner or later anyway, so why waste so much time and energy learning how to distinguish it? Also, I suggest we leave as soon as possible, because there are many malicious gazes looking in this direction. They might even be this swindler's accomplice. With that, Bosha very obscurely pointed at the guests at a few tables not far away. Although they tried their best to act as if nothing had happened, the corners of their eyes never shifted. They were constantly paying attention to the development of the situation, and no one knew what they were scheming in the dark. One had to know that this was Valen City, known for its chaos and evil. Anything could happen here. Merchants who were refined and courteous 1 second could draw their weapons and fight to the death with their enemies in the next. Their combat skills were not much worse than professional warriors, and some of them were even warriors of high ranks. Otherwise, how could they survive in the fierce and vicious competition and continue to develop and grow? After all, smugglers needed more protection than most merchants. Whether it was the armies of the various cities or the bandits cruising on the sea, they should be their natural enemies to some extent. The slightest carelessness would cause them to lose everything. In the worst case, they might even lose their lives. As one of the nobles of Linton City, Andre knew very well what kind of people the merchants who dared to do business with the pirates were. To put it nicely, they were brave adventurers. To put it bluntly, they were a group of greedy vultures. This was because the way they acted was similar to the birds that specialized in devouring rotting corpses. Once they discovered a dying target, they would immediately gather in large numbers and wait to absorb nutrients from a corpse. Obviously, those smugglers with ulterior motives believed that the two young rookies were no match for the famous Jays, and it wouldn't take long for them to be cheated. So, they were waiting to buy the cheated items at a low price. Some of them noticed the aristocratic temperament that Andre showed and planned to kidnap him to see if they could exchange him for some ransom. Silently feeling the increasing malice in the tavern, Andre didn't show the slightest bit of worry. Instead, he laughed heartily. "Ha ha ha ha. This is so interesting. I like the atmosphere here. It's a mixture of depression and tension. There's no trust between people at all. They're always thinking of plotting against each other. It's so familiar, so touching." To a certain extent, the smugglers in the Hiccup Dragon Tavern were basically the same as the working environment in his previous life. On one hand, there was competition everywhere. Not only did they have to guard against attacks from their opponents, they also had to be careful of their backs at all times. There was no telling when the originally pure and cute little sister, or the little brother who called you Big Brother, would stab you in the back at the crucial moment, and then take away everything you had. On the other hand, cooperation was everywhere. Even if they were competitors, they sometimes had to exchange information with each other. They might even join hands to attack a third party that wanted to interfere. Perhaps the only difference was that the place where he worked in his previous life had legal and moral restraints. He couldn't do anything too outrageous, such as murder and robbery or kidnapping and extortion. Otherwise, if he was accidentally exposed, the police would invite him in for a cup of tea. However, these smugglers were different. They were originally a group of anarchists who viewed law and order as rubbish for the sake of huge profits. As long as they could make a lot of money, they wouldn't mind doing a little part-time work. Many smugglers would transform into pirates during the voyage, looting ships that were weaker than themselves. They might even kill everyone on the ship in order to keep it a secret. They vividly reflected the selfishness and cruelty of human nature. Seeing a trace of excitement flash in Andre's eyes, Portia immediately looked around vigilantly. Then, she gritted her teeth and reminded, "Damn it, be serious. Have you forgotten that I'm a thief with a huge bounty on my head? If I'm recognized, I'll be in big trouble. I don't want to experience being hunted down by the whole city again. That feeling sucks." Seeing the halfling's nervous look, Andre shrugged his shoulders indifferently. With a dangerous smile on his face, he comforted her softly. "Don't worry. If you're accidentally recognized, then we'll wash this tavern with blood. Except for the maid who kindly reminded us just now. No one else will be left alive. Anyway, every gold coin in these guys' pockets is stained with the blood of innocent people. Even if we kill them all, we don't have any psychological burden. Moreover, my plan is about to unfold, and I just need to create a little chaos. Don't you think that the death of a dozen smugglers at once will cause a lot of commotion? Especially those rich people. They will definitely leave the Sardinia Islands immediately by ship to prevent themselves from being the victims of a bloody conflict. Their evacuation will also cause a series of chain reactions. When that happens, even the Pirate King will have a headache. Oh, I almost forgot. Before that, I have to inquire about the whereabouts of a certain person. After all, this is the most important purpose of tonight." With that said, he placed a magic ring in front of the swindler to ensure that the latter was always in a state of hypnosis. Then he asked, "Tell me, where can I find Jays? He's the guy who was responsible for connecting Clarissa and Bessemer. It's said that he often appears in this tavern." Chapter 556. I'm Jess Parrott, Clarissa Bessemer's middleman. Jess, who was in a trance, didn't realize what revealing his true identity meant to him and didn't know what kind of sudden change would occur to his originally ordinary fate. There were some things that one couldn't escape from once they were involved in. "Jess, so you're that middleman. Who would have thought that a middleman in Valen City would also work part-time as a swindler? The City of Sin truly lives up to its name." Andre sighed in amazement as he began to examine the other party from head to toe. One had to know that a middleman was a special profession that relied on credibility, reputation, and one's own abilities to make a living. If any of these were missing, it would lead to a large loss of customers. He found it hard to imagine how a swindler had won Clarissa Bessemer's trust. After all, it could be seen from this woman's behavior that she was constantly in a state of anxiety. She didn't even have a fixed address in order to not let others find out about her whereabouts, and would change her residence every once in a while. She was even more cautious than a rabbit. Of course, behind all her strange behavior, there should be a serious anxiety disorder or mental illness that was very likely related to her murdered father. After thinking this through, Andre immediately asked, "Where is she living now? How do you usually keep in touch with her?" However, the answer Jess gave this time wasn't so satisfactory. His two empty eyes were silent for a few seconds, as if he was searching through his memories. He then shook his head lightly. "I don't know. I also don't know where Clarissa is hiding. She's a very cautious woman. When we meet, she always wraps herself up tightly with a headscarf and veil. Apart from her eyes and hair, nothing else can be seen. As for how we contact each other through the bulletin board next to the free market. If I have a client, I'll leave a message on it. Usually, she'll send a 7 or 8-year-old child to deliver the time and address of the meeting in about 3 hours. When I arrive with the client, she'll already be waiting there." Bulletin board? Andre's eyes widened, revealing an unconcealable shock. He simply couldn't believe that such a cautious woman would actually think of using public facilities to contact each other. It was too illogical, but the effect was simply perfect. No wonder countless people wanted to follow the clues to find Clarissa Bessemer's whereabouts. But in the end, they didn't find anything. They probably never would have dreamed that the seemingly mysterious contact was actually done in public. It was just that no one had ever noticed it. From a certain perspective, it could be said that Clarissa made use of the misconceptions in their thinking, like playing hide and seek with children. People who hid in high places were always difficult to find because they would always subconsciously ignore places that was beyond their line of sight. Using public facilities to communicate was also because the people who investigated her had been in an environment of mutual deception for too long. They always felt that there must be a mysterious method behind such situations. In the end, they didn't expect the answer to be a bulletin board in the downtown area. Irony. What a great irony. Perhaps before this, Andre only wanted the other party to help him decipher the contents of the letter. But now, he started to develop a great interest in this woman and couldn't wait to meet her. He smelled the aura of someone similar from Clarissa's way of doing things. She must be someone of the opposite sex, with a personality very similar to his. Add to that the fact that she was able to grasp a dozen complex languages at the age of 32. Her intelligence definitely exceeded the limits of ordinary people. In just a few short minutes, the image of a mature, cautious, intellectual, capable, and insightful woman slowly took shape in Andre's mind. If she hadn't been born in the Sardinia Islands, where pirates gathered, she might have already become a mage who grasped powerful arcane spells. Andre suddenly burst into laughter without warning, continuing for a full 3 minutes before he lowered his voice and muttered to himself, "Clarissa Bessemer, it looks like the greatest gain from this trip to Valence City is you. A woman with the potential to become a great mage, a genius with outstanding intelligence, a master of 12 languages, and yet willing to stay in the sinful Valence City. There must be some hidden reason behind this. I hope you don't disappoint me." As soon as he finished speaking, Portia, who was sitting on a nearby chair, hurriedly kicked Andre and reminded him with a serious expression, "Damn it, are you crazy? Did you notice that a few fellows blocked the exit just now? Prepare for battle. I'm afraid we won't be able to leave this tavern if we don't see some blood today." "Is that so? What a group of fellows. They actually gave us a decent excuse. I've decided to repay them with blood and death. Do you still remember what I said a few minutes ago? You can go all out and cause a huge ruckus. You don't have to think about how to wrap things up because I'll take responsibility for all the consequences." Saying this, Andre slowly stood up from his chair and swept his gaze over every customer. After confirming that there were no innocents, he drew his rapier in an extremely elegant manner and bowed slightly to all the customers present. "Good evening to all the greedy smugglers and daring swindlers. Nice to meet you. To be honest, I'm actually someone who really hates the use of violence. Normally, I wouldn't choose to use violence if I could solve the problem with money and talk. But unfortunately, there will always be more idiots than smart people in this world. They don't know that if they want to live longer, they have to stay away from people several times stronger than them. They also shouldn't have any crooked thoughts, or the god of death could descend from the sky at any time. I'll give you a chance now, a chance to live. Get out of the door within the count of 10. Listen carefully, it's get out, not crawl, not kneel, and definitely not walk. If you do as I say, then I'll forget about those unfriendly actions just now. If you don't." Before he could finish speaking, a slightly plump middle-aged man, wearing inlaid leather armor, stood up and retorted with a cold smile, "What can you do if you don't do it? Arrogant brat, you don't seem to understand the situation at hand. This isn't your father's territory, and we're not serfs who are scared out of their wits when they see nobles. Put away your deliberately mystifying tricks. There's no place for a brat like you to speak in Valence City." Chapter 557. Still wet behind the ears? Sounds interesting. You have to know that it has been a long time since anyone dared to use such words to describe me. Since you don't intend to accept my good intentions, then let us use the simplest and most direct method to solve the problem. Don't worry, the whole process will be very, very quick. You won't even feel any pain because I still have some important matters to attend to. I don't have time to delay for too long. Andre's lips curved into a beautiful arc as he spoke, as if he was mocking and pitying her. He wasn't the slightest bit angry because of her insults. A person with a strong mind like him had long passed the age where he would be enraged by a little verbal provocation. He wouldn't be affected by negative emotions such as jealousy and hatred. After all, jealousy would only make a person more narrow-minded, and pure hatred wouldn't be able to bring any harm to the enemy. Everything was as a certain philosopher had said. No matter how powerful the words and thoughts were, they couldn't be more threatening than actual actions. If it was expressed in simpler terms, it would be to not make a fuss if you could make a move. Insulting your enemy 10,000 times wouldn't be as effective as beating him up. Podia obviously discovered Andre's plan. The corners of her eyes, hidden under her hood, twitched slightly. She muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear, "Oh, my God, if this guy really wants to kill everyone in this tavern, he's a complete madman, and a madman with a smart and rational mind. I really want to know if there's anything in this world that he doesn't dare to do." The smugglers of the Sardinia Islands weren't traveling merchants that anyone could bully. Not only did they have a considerable number of mercenaries, but they also had close ties with many criminal organizations. The big-breasted lowly did not dare to imagine what would happen the next morning if they killed all the smugglers in front of them today. Perhaps the two of them would be wanted by the whole city, and the bounty would be enough to make every local resident go crazy. By then, the scene would be 10,000 times more lively than when she stole the safe of the Devil's ship half a month ago. Even though the halflings were a bunch of daring little fellows, Andre's actions still made Portia nervous and sweaty. In just a few seconds, droplets of water had condensed on the tip of her nose, and her palms were wet and moist. She had to take a few deep breaths to calm herself down. As the atmosphere in the Hiccup Dragon Tavern became more and more tense, the middle-aged man, wearing inlaid leather armor, gradually felt that something was wrong. He immediately shouted at Jays, who had been motionless all this time. "Hey, Jess, are you not going to say anything? Although they were your first prey, we can't turn a blind eye to such naked provocation. Otherwise, how will we do business in Valen City in the future?" But it was a pity that Jesse, who was still in a hypnotic state, didn't respond at all. He continued to sit on the chair as though he had fallen asleep. "Man, don't you think it's a bit strange? I've never seen Jess sit still for so long. Is he being held hostage?" Another person who looked slightly younger reminded in a low voice. "Kidnap? You're saying that our most outstanding swindler here has failed?" The middle-aged man was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth. He looked at Jess with an incredulous gaze and quickly discovered that his pupils were dilated and lifeless. Heavens! He seems to be under the control of some spell. Everyone be careful. One of these two is a spellcaster. What? Spellcaster? Someone come. Someone come quickly. I need protection. Bastard. Put down the table quickly. I don't want to be hit directly by a spell. Once the words spellcaster were heard, it was as if a bomb had been thrown into the hall. It couldn't be helped. Anyone with a bit of knowledge on the Oleo continent knew that both divine spells and arcane spells were extremely powerful, especially those with all kinds of strange abilities. It was simply impossible to guard against them, and if you were not careful, you would be hit. Even the weakest level 0 spell could easily kill someone. It had to be said that perhaps it was because they were experienced and knowledgeable, but the quality of the smugglers was quite good. They scattered in a few seconds, using tables, chairs, and bar counters as cover. A few of them even shouted loudly at the door. Not long after, a dozen or so fully armed mercenaries rushed in. The Burping Dragon Bar wasn't large to begin with, and was a bit like a high-class leisure club on Earth. Thus, it immediately became very crowded when there were more people. Those who valued their lives even tried their best to squeeze out, afraid that they would become the first target of attack. After all, those who could sit here and drink and chat were not fools. They were very clear that if someone was hit directly by a spell, there was an 80% to 90% chance that it wouldn't bode well for them. Thus, they all let their bodyguards and mercenaries hold up their shields in front of them. As for the middle-aged man standing at the front, who had nowhere to retreat, he was already sweating profusely. He secretly regretted his actions of being blinded by greed. At first, He only wanted to take the opportunity to see if he could take advantage of the situation. Now, not only did he not take advantage of the situation, but he had also closed himself into a dead end. Andre looked at the slightly panicked crowd with interest and asked with a smile, "Are you guys ready? If you are, I'm going to make a move. Just like I said earlier, don't worry. The pain will be short. Death will come very soon." "No, you can't do that. We are all important members of the city. If anything happens, the two of you will be jointly wanted by the Underground Guild and the pirates. You definitely won't be able to leave this place alive." Seeing that Andre was about to make a move, the middle-aged man finally couldn't help but start to threaten him. However, his slightly panicked eyes betrayed his feelings at that moment. "Ha ha! Underground Guild? Pirate Alliance? Unfortunately, they don't scare me. But if all of you die tonight, they will definitely be in a terrible fix. All right, I don't like to waste too much time with dead people. Goodbye." As the last word left his mouth, Andre suddenly raised the magic ring on his hand and chanted an incantation without hesitation. 3 blinding rays of red light accurately hit the strongest mercenaries in the front row. He then laughed coldly and ordered, "Go, kill them all for me." Under the effect of the rank 3 Arcana spell, Berserk Charm, they had no way of resisting at all. They immediately began to kill their companions beside them. As most of them had yet to react to what was going on, 7 or 8 people fell into pools of blood within a dozen seconds. The dark red blood slowly gathered into a large pool on the floor, and a pungent smell filled the air. Chapter 558. Damn it. Those mercenaries are being controlled by magic. Kill them all. A smuggler screamed in horror as he madly rushed toward the door, trying to escape from this small tavern that could be called a slaughterhouse. However, it was a pity that the entrance wasn't wide enough, and there were a lot of people rushing out, so they were completely blocked by the 2 well-developed fellows. No one could hope to escape for a while. "Someone come and help me. I need a priest's treatment." Another smuggler who had been stabbed in the abdomen knelt on the ground, desperately trying to stuff his intestines back in. At the same time, he cried for help with a pained expression. However, there was no response. A second later, the mercenary who was under the control of the spell rushed forward. His speed was fast and accurate, and he directly pierced his lower jaw with a dagger. He didn't even have time to scream before his eyes slowly lost their luster. Finally, he fell to the ground with a plop. Although 3 mercenaries were not a lot, under Andre's command, they attacked with lightning speed. After getting rid of their comrade who posed the greatest threat, they began to hunt down the smugglers and swindlers. In the blink of an eye, the tavern was littered with corpses. Apart from the middle-aged man standing at the front and the maid who had fainted from fright, the rest were all dead. Even those who were lucky enough to rush out of the door were killed by Portia's flying daggers. Suddenly, fast, efficient, through his grasp of the enemy's mentality and perfect tactical coordination, Andre proved with his actions that even if he could not cast Arcane spell for the time being, he was still an excellent mage. Several warriors with decent strength did not even have the chance to display their abilities and died in an abnormally aggrieved manner. This was a mage, one of the top professions in Orire. As long as they were well prepared, even the so-called omnipotent gods could not do anything to them. Most of the time, they could easily solve many seemingly impossible tasks just by relying on their extraordinarily intelligent brains. To a certain extent, they only treated arcane spells as a tool to explore the unknown and not as a means of combat. Looking at the expressions of despair and fear on the survivors' faces, Andre spread his hands with a smile and asked in a joking tone, "How is it? I was right, wasn't I?" The whole process would be very fast, so fast that they wouldn't feel much pain. In fact, life was a very complicated thing. Sometimes it was very strong, and no matter how bad the living environment was or how terrible the disease was, it would not be able to destroy it. But sometimes it was very fragile, and as long as a few of its important organs were destroyed, such as the brain, heart, kidney, liver, and so on, it would soon be lost. Do you know? The reason why I want to kill everyone in this tavern is not because of the verbal affront just now, nor is it to retaliate against your ill-intentioned actions. Using the words of the smugglers, petty revenge is foolish. It does not bring any profit, and at the same time, it may attract unnecessary enemies. Please remember, I'm killing you because I've been commissioned by a certain power to create panic and chaos in Valen City. Therefore, this is part of my job, and I don't have any feelings for the dead involved. Do you understand? Who? Who is that so-called power? How dare they challenge the underground guilds and the pirate king in the Sardinia Islands? Anyway, I'm going to die soon. At least let me know when I die. The middle-aged man might have known. He had no chance of surviving tonight, so he might as well throw caution to the wind. He stared with bloodshot eyes and asked loudly with hurried breathing. Smugglers were originally gamblers who danced with the god of death, especially in the south. Every smuggler who went out to sea did not lack the courage to face death. They were very clear on how dangerous this business was. Perhaps a person who had just earned a large sum of money last time could mysteriously die the next time, and not even a complete corpse could be found. Of course. I'm a benevolent and generous person, and I'd be happy to fulfill your dying wish. I believe that as a merchant who often comes to Valen City to do business, you must have heard a lot about the taboos of this city. One of them happened many years ago and was called the rat disaster by the local residents, right? Andre purposely used a very mysterious tone to guide him. His goal was obviously to put the blame on old Bernie and his Ratmen gang. In fact, he had already thought of a follow-up plan before he took action. First, he would kill a large number of smugglers to divert the attention of the underground guilds and the pirates. Then, he would force the relationship between the rat men and the underground guilds to worsen until old Bernie's patience reached its limit and an intense, bloody conflict broke out. In addition, the Majoria, who had fallen to the ground, was not really unconscious. She was just pretending to be unconscious. Andre dared to guarantee that she would remember every word he said and sell it for a good price when the pirates or the underground guilds appeared. Rat disaster? So those were creatures are starting to become restless again. The middle-aged man lowered his head and pondered for a few minutes. Soon, he revealed an expression of sudden realization. It was obvious that his channels of information were very well informed. He even investigated this kind of old score clearly. He did not even need others to remind him and found the answer himself. Seeing that the other party was acting according to the script that he had prepared beforehand, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, revealing an imperceptible smile. He then pretended to be proud of himself and nodded lightly. That's right. Perhaps you still don't know, but the aged Rat King feels that his life is coming to an end. The underground guilds are pressuring him step by step, intending to eliminate all the Ratmen after his death. That's why he decided to fight to the death for his race, and we are the hired killers. In order for you to die in peace, I will reveal some important information to you. That is, we are not the only ones who have been hired. In the next few days, there will be more assassins coming one after another. At that time, there will be many people who will follow you to the world after death. All right, now that we've said so much, it's about time to send you on your way. I have more important work to do, so I don't have time to chat with you. Don't worry, my sword is very fast. Having said that, Andre raised his thin sword and aimed at the man's eyes, ready to stab. Just as he exerted strength in his arm, the middle-aged man suddenly raised his head and shouted, "Stop! Stop! I have something to say. I want to make a deal with you. You're an assassin, aren't you? Since you're an assassin, you'll definitely get a reward for killing me. If I'm willing to add a 0 to the reward, will you let me go?" Anyway, the employer didn't specify who you have to kill. They just let you create chaos. Think about it. As long as you're willing to let me go, you'll get a reward and earn 10 times the price of buying your life. What a good deal. Chapter 559. It had to be said that when humans were faced with a desperate situation, they would often explode with strength that even they could not believe. Look at this smuggler. In order to survive, he actually mustered his courage and planned to use a huge amount of wealth to move Andre. This was because he believed that no one in this world could resist the temptation of gold coins. If they could not, it could only mean one thing. The amount of gold coins was not enough to satisfy the greedy appetite of the other party. Staring at the other party's eyes that were filled with excitement, Andre's face revealed a sarcastic smile. He then put down the thin sword that he had raised and used the index finger of his other hand to lightly tap the other party's forehead. "Dear Mr. Merchant, I think you're mistaken about one thing. Not everyone is like you who regards money as more important than anything else. Furthermore, gold coins are only a medium for transactions. They cannot satisfy physical needs, nor can they be used to keep warm. Once they are separated from various goods, they have no value at all. Please remember, wealth is only a tool to achieve your goal. If you reverse the positions of the two, then you're putting the cart before the horse. Of course, the most important thing is that your mere wealth of tens of thousands of gold coins is far from enough to move me. Furthermore, if you're still alive, it's very likely that you'll expose our next plan of action. In a situation where the risk and reward are not proportionate, do you think I'll choose to let you go to inform the pirates and the underground guild, or eliminate the problem once and for all?" Every time he said another reason, the smuggler's face darkened. In the end, he finally understood that his final struggle was just a clown's performance in the eyes of this young man in front of him. When he understood this, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. His laughter was filled with bitterness and self-mockery. Then, he muttered to himself, "Yes, you're right. I'm really stupid. I've lived half my life, but I still haven't figured out why I risked my life to earn wealth. Fortunately, I understand now. At least I'm better than those idiots who died in a daze." Well said. Learning new knowledge, unraveling the truth behind the facade, and then using all these to improve one's way of thinking and even elevating one's soul. This is the sign of an intelligent life that continues to evolve. Congratulations, although you're about to die, you're able to wake up before you die and become one of the few intelligent people in this world. As he spoke, Andre placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly, not stingy with his praise. What was the standard of a smart person? This question had troubled countless scholars for thousands of years. Everyone had a different opinion. Some people believed that the speed of learning and accepting information from the outside world was the most important. Others believed that a truly intelligent person could only analyze what the other person was thinking by observing their body language. However, Andre's criteria had nothing to do with the above two. He felt that the most important thing for a smart person was their metacognitive ability, which was the cognition of cognition and knowledge about knowledge. Perhaps it sounded complicated, but in fact, it was very easy to understand. It was equivalent to whether a person could filter, optimize, and remove the wrong parts of this knowledge in the process of accepting knowledge from the outside world, and then convert it into their own ideas and store it. In essence, metacognition was a phenomenon different from cognition. It reflected the human body's understanding of itself. As the saying goes, a person may be able to see the strengths and weaknesses of others easily, but it was difficult to see oneself clearly. There was no doubt that anyone who had a clear understanding of themselves was a truly intelligent person. They knew where their limits were, and they never challenged things that were beyond their capabilities. They also knew when to persevere and when to give up. As a smart person, Andre appreciated the smuggler's change, but this did not mean that he would let him go. Just as the merchant began to close his eyes and pray to the goddess of wealth for the last time, the originally drooping rapier suddenly drew a cold light in the air. The sharp tip of the rapier pierced straight into the merchant's left eye, completely penetrating his brain. Just as the nerve-sensing system transmitted the pain back, the merchant had already fallen straight to the ground, completely dead. However, compared to the faces around him that were filled with fear and pain, his expression was very peaceful, as if he had already accepted death. What a pity! If we didn't meet in such a way, perhaps we could have become good friends. Perhaps this is fate. After all, regret and imperfection are the main principles of life, and no one is an exception. Andre shook off the brain matter on his rapier and lamented at the corpse. "He's dead? Oh my God! seeing that you were chatting so happily just now. I thought you would spare his life." Portia exclaimed, dumbfounded. She could not understand at all how Andre, who was still chatting and laughing a few seconds ago, could kill him a few seconds later. Especially when he handed over the rapier, there was no hesitation at all. Just thinking about it sent chills down her spine. Noticing the flash of fear in the halfling's eyes, Andre shrugged his shoulders indifferently and explained, "We were indeed chatting happily, but what does this have to do with me killing him? I admire that he was able to complete his self-awareness before he died, and I killed him to ensure that the plan could be carried out smoothly. There is no contradiction between the two." It had to be said that his way of thinking was indeed a little different. To be exact, it was very different. Portia was speechless for a long time, but she could not say a single word. As his intelligence attribute increased, Andre could feel that his brain was undergoing some kind of transformation. Previously, he had always been troubled by problems, but now, as long as he separated two contradictions and thought about them at the same time, he could quickly find a solution. It was for this reason that he appeared to be temperamental and unpredictable in the eyes of many people, very similar to many high-level mages. But they did not know that this was actually an improvement in his understanding of the whole world after his intelligence had broken through to a certain level. It was just like how the aborigines of a primitive tribe could not understand the operating rules of the civilized world. It was not only a breakthrough from quantitative change to qualitative change in knowledge, but also an evolution of life itself. In addition, Orier itself was a world full of incredible power, especially the omnipresent magical energy that affected everyone all the time. Even Andre could not figure out what kind of changes were happening to him. Chapter 560. All right, it looks like I'll never be able to understand your strange behavior, as well as the crazy thoughts in your head. But what do you plan to do next? You've gone a little overboard this time. I can guarantee that with the smell of blood in the tavern, it will attract the attention of the surrounding people in 10 minutes at most. When that time comes, the entire city may be under martial law. After staring at Andre for half a day, Portia finally decided not to let herself be tangled up in this. She decisively changed the topic to the urgent matter at hand. After all, the Hiccup Dragon Tavern wasn't located in a remote alley on the side of the street. It was located right next to a bustling market and was one of the places with the most traffic in Valence City. Even after nightfall, there were still many hawkers and shops open for business. Based on the sounds of fighting just now, as well as the miserable cries of the smugglers before their deaths, she was willing to bet that there were people outside who had long since noticed what was happening inside. The only reason they didn't rush in was because they were patiently waiting for the people inside to walk out. Hearing the halfling's evaluation, Andre couldn't help but think of Loretta Botons, who was planning to summon the Demon Lord in Lincoln City. He suddenly realized that there were many similarities between him and the halfling. For example, both of them had an extremely intelligent brain. Both of them were experts at deception and disguise. Both of them would do anything to achieve their goals. Both of them were extremely daring to do things that others wouldn't even dare to think about. The only difference was that he was influenced by his outlook on life, values, and morals from his previous life. No matter what he did, he would always stick to his bottom line and try his best not to cross it. Perhaps it was these similar yet different traits that attracted the Lich's interest. That was why he created this dangerous game with a time limit of 2 years. He wanted to compare the two of them and see which one was more outstanding. Thinking of this, Andre smiled and shook his head. Crazy? Perhaps. I only want to live a better life and pursue the knowledge and power that I desire. Anyone who blocks this path will become my enemy and be crushed, destroyed, or even annihilated. As for the problem you're worried about, it's only a small problem. I can guarantee that those guys outside won't pose any threat to us. Finished speaking, he gestured to the 3 mercenaries who were still under the spell. Go, kill all the people loitering around the door. Yes, even though there were several bloody wounds on their bodies, the mercenaries still carried out their orders meticulously. Not long after, there were sounds of intense fighting and cursing outside. It was obvious that it was a mess. Through the gap between the curtains, Portia could clearly see the crowd fleeing in all directions around the market. There were also some people who looked like guild members who were besieging the three mercenaries. Due to the huge difference in numbers, the mercenaries were at an absolute disadvantage right from the start. They would be defeated in a few minutes at most. Of course, as sacrifices and cannon fodder to buy time, they did not need to win. They did not even need to be in a stalemate. A few minutes was enough for Andre and the others to escape from this troublesome place. By the time the people from the underground guild reacted, it would be too late. Magic is really convenient. It actually solved the problem so easily. The corners of Portia's mouth curled up slightly as she muttered softly. She then glanced at the magic ring that was emitting a faint halo from the corner of her eyes. Her fingers hidden under the cloak could not help but move a few times. As a halfling thief, she was always unable to resist the temptation of treasures. Especially after seeing the power of the charm ring with her own eyes, there was a demon in her mind that kept growling. Steal it. It should belong to us. Andre was keenly aware of the greed in the little girl's eyes. He raised a finger with the ring and asked playfully, "You want it?" Of course. Of course I want to get it. I'm even willing to pay any price for it. As long as you can give it to me, I'll be yours from now on. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Portia licked her lips and stretched out her small hand in an attempt to take the ring off her finger. She did not notice at all that her eyes had been staring at the light emitted by the gem for too long, to the point that her thoughts were starting to go out of control. She was obviously under the influence of the hypnosis. Without any hesitation, Andre directly took off the charm ring and smiled as he placed it on the big-breasted Loli's hand. He then whispered softly in her ear, "The ring is now yours. But remember, from today onwards, you belong to me." Perhaps the whisper in her ear made Portia feel a trace of strangeness in her heart. She immediately woke up from the hypnosis and stared at the charm ring in her hand with wide eyes. She then raised her head to glance at Andre and muttered to herself, "Oh, damn it. Why do I feel like I've done something stupid?" Ha ha ha. That's right. You did something stupid just now. Did you know that this ring has a very strong hypnotic ability? Anyone who stares at the light of the gem for a few seconds without shifting their gaze will immediately be hypnotized. Unfortunately, you secretly stared at it for a full minute. It would be strange if you weren't affected. Andre caressed Portia's thick hair and laughed heartily as he explained. He finally understood the true meaning of the phrase, "Curiosity killed the cat." The natural curiosity of halflings was simply too strong. They would often selectively ignore some dangerous signals in order to obtain what they wanted. Portia soon realized this as well. She scratched her head in annoyance. Heavens, I've gone crazy. He actually sold himself out for a mere magic ring. I'm the best thief in Valence City. If I want something, shouldn't I just steal it? Looking at the big-breasted Loli's frantic appearance, Andre felt that the scene in front of him was extremely amusing. He wanted to continue teasing her, so he purposely rested his gaze on her ample bosom and reminded her in a meaningful tone, "Remember, you promised that you'll be mine from now on. You'll do whatever I ask of you." Bastard, I don't need you to remind me. I remember what I said. As long as you have the guts, I'll accompany you at any time. Portia obviously saw that Andre was mostly joking. She didn't back down and puffed out her chest with force, her eyes full of provocation. Without a doubt, she was now a little angry out of embarrassment. After all, anyone would feel embarrassed if a woman said those ambiguous and suggestive words to a man in an unconscious state. Even Portia, who had an extroverted personality, was no exception. Chapter 561. As a smart person, Andre knew that this was not the time to talk about this topic. Otherwise, the little girl in front of him would immediately turn hostile. Hence, he put away his teasing tone and pretended to be innocent as he shrugged. "I'm just kidding. Don't take it too seriously. But I have to remind you that it's best to control your curiosity and greed in the future. Don't stare at anything that shines for more than 5 seconds. Otherwise, today's situation will happen again. The world we live in is full of danger, especially the power of magic. It's impossible to guard against it. Although you're outstanding in other aspects, your performance in this aspect is a little lacking. I'm lacking? It's obviously the fault of this magic ring. Who would have thought that it would release hypnotic rays indiscriminately? Portia obviously did not intend to admit her mistake. Instead, she made a very shameless countercharge. Of course, being unreasonable was one of the natural instincts and privileges of a woman. Her actions were understandable. Looking at the guilty eyes of the halfling, Andre smiled and shook his head. He did not pursue the matter further. Instead, he pointed to the back door of the tavern and said, "Well, now's not the time to discuss who's right and who's wrong. If we don't leave now, I'm afraid we won't be able to leave after those mercenaries outside die. Anyway, you just need to remember that you owe me once." "No problem. I owe you once. Before I repay this debt, I'll always be at your service. But this ring has to be included in the payment." Saying that, Portia directly put the ring of charm on the middle finger of her right hand. An incomparably satisfied expression appeared on her face. It was obvious that she was very fascinated by this piece of jewelry that was enchanted with powerful arcane magic. Perhaps it was the natural curiosity of a halfling towards treasures, or perhaps it was the desire of a thief to collect them. In short, she did not think that exchanging a few years of free time for a ring was a bad deal. Things like value were never absolute. Something that was incomparably precious in the eyes of some people might be no different from trash on the roadside in the eyes of others. Just like a glass of water, many people would think that it could be found everywhere and was not even worth a copper coin. But to a traveler struggling in the desert, there was nothing in the world that could compare to its value. By the same logic, the value of the ring of charm, in the eyes of Portia, who had almost no contact with magic, was immeasurable. Especially the spell that forcibly controlled the mercenaries just now. She had the urge to worship it. But on the contrary, in Andre's opinion, the most important part of the ring of charm wasn't the 3 times a day of berserk charm, let alone the hypnosis and suggestion. Instead, it was the techniques used to create it. As long as he mastered the techniques, he could replicate as many rings as he wanted without any difficulty. It was far less valuable than an elite bandit like Portia. Now that the other party was willing to stay, he naturally would not be reluctant to part with a mere magical item. After all, it would not be long before the magical energy in his body regained its balance. At that time, with the power of a grade 9 wizard and grade 5 arcana spell, there was no need for him to hide. Even if he openly revealed his identity, not many people would dare to attack him. This was because grade 5 arcana spell had already begun to cover long-distance teleportation spells. This also meant that as long as a wizard was fully prepared, it was almost impossible to kill him. Moreover, if the attack failed, he would have to bear the consequences of the ensuing revenge. Just imagine, every day, no matter if it was eating, drinking, sleeping, or going to the toilet, one would have to worry that someone would suddenly appear in front of them and cast a fireball, lightning, magic missile, poison gas, acid, or other destructive spells at them. How difficult would it be for them to survive? Those with weak mental fortitude might even choose to commit suicide. Someone once said that death was not scary. What was scary was waiting for death to arrive. A wizard above grade 9 was a powerful individual who could make others experience pain and despair. Unless one had the confidence to kill the wizard in a single blow, peaceful coexistence was the wisest choice. After reaching a tacit verbal agreement, Portia quickly searched the corpses for valuables. She put them in a backpack that she had rummaged out of nowhere and quietly slipped out of the back door to investigate the situation. After a dozen seconds, she returned the way she came and gestured to the people inside the house that it was safe outside. "We could go now. There's no one watching outside for now, but we have to move quickly. The 3 brave mercenaries of yours are either dead or injured. The last one is barely holding on. The people from the underground guild will rush in at most 2 minutes. Don't worry. When they come in, they won't get any information other than corpses all over the place." After saying that, Andre stood up from the chair unhurriedly and walked to the young maid. He stuffed a bag full of gold and silver coins into her palm and bowed politely. "I'm very sorry, beautiful lady. Due to our willful actions, this tavern will probably be closed for a long time. In order to compensate for the loss of your job, please accept this money. Don't be nervous and don't be afraid. When the people from the Underground Guild arrive, you can explain everything clearly. I believe that they won't make things difficult for a frightened young lady." Feeling the heavy weight of the money bag in her hand, Jiria opened her eyes and asked with a trembling voice, "You knew from the start that I was pretending to be unconscious?" Andre smiled and nodded lightly. "Of course. How could professionals like us not be able to differentiate between real death and fake death? Furthermore, your skills in pretending to be dead weren't very good. Your legs were trembling and your chest was rising and falling greatly. I could tell if you paid a little attention. Then why didn't you kill me? Why did you choose to let me go? Why did you give me such a large sum of money?" Perhaps because she was too frightened, Jiria's entire body was trembling. She couldn't believe that she had escaped death. "Why? To be honest, I'm not too sure either. Perhaps it's because you're the only kind-hearted person in this tavern who warned me to be careful of swindlers. You must know that there aren't many kind-hearted ladies like you in Valen City. That's why I suggest that you leave this place by boat immediately after you leave. The dark clouds of war have already shrouded the skies of the Sardinia Islands. It won't be long before rivers of blood flow." After saying these obviously suggestive words, Andre reached out his hand to wipe off the bloodstains on Jay's cheeks. Then he dragged Jay's, whose eyes were lifeless, and turned around to walk towards the back door. Chapter 562. But before Andre could take a few steps, Jiria suddenly rushed up from behind, hugged him, and gave him a passionate kiss. Then she gasped for breath and said, "Thank you. Although you look like a ruthless killer on the surface, you're a good person at heart. May the gods bless you. I wanted to leave this damn place for a long time. Now that I have this money, I can finally start a new life in another city. I don't have to endure the endless harassment and rape anymore." A few months ago, I saw with my own eyes the previous maid who worked at the Hiccup Dragon Tavern being raped by a dozen filthy and smelly pirates in an alley for a full day and night. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and chose to commit suicide. It's a nightmare for any young girl. Feeling the stimulation from her ample breasts squeezing against his chest, Andre lifted his arm and gently pushed her away. He shook his head with a polite smile. "No, you don't have to thank me or anyone. If you want to thank someone, thank the kindness in your heart. It's what gave you everything you have today. All right, I'm in a hurry. To ensure that the people from the Underground Guild don't have any suspicions, it's best that you continue to lie down and pretend to be dead. Also, even though it sounds a little depressing, I have to tell you that the other cities in the south aren't as wonderful as you think. It's just that they hide their dark sides and aren't easy to discover. So be careful. If you really want to find a safe place to settle down, I suggest that you go to the countryside. When the time comes, you just have to disguise yourself as a fallen noble, buy a large piece of cheap land, and hire a few farmers. It won't be difficult for you to live a peaceful life. Finally, I wish you a peaceful and happy life in the future. Goodbye, beautiful girl." Andre winked with a smile, turned around, opened the back door, and disappeared into the dark alley. Looking at his back, Jiria's eyes revealed a trace of doubt. At the same time, she muttered to herself, "What a strange and contradictory person. He can coldly kill so many smugglers and swindlers, and at the same time, he cares so much for a strange girl. Is he kind or evil? More importantly, he's so handsome." Just as an infatuated expression appeared on her face, a series of noisy footsteps came from outside the tavern, followed by a series of loud curses. "Damn it, what a strong smell of blood. I bet there's no one alive in there." "Nonsense. As long as you're not blind, you'll be able to see the thickness of the blood on the ground. At least 15 or 16 people have died to reach this level. What should we do?" The customers of the Hiccup Dragon Tavern are basically a group of relatively powerful smugglers. If they're all killed, then we will be in big trouble. Trouble? Ha! Man, this is no longer a problem. It was a disaster. A huge disaster. Think about how we're going to explain this to the guild leaders. From now on, we better pray that there are at least 1 or 2 survivors. Otherwise, everyone will suffer together with them. Accompanied by quarrels and complaints, the sound of footsteps got closer and closer, and he could even see a shadow swaying outside the door. Angelia felt her heart beating wildly. No matter how she tried to calm it down, she could not. In the end, she could only clench her teeth and stomp her feet. She hid the money pouch in her tight shorts as fast as she could, and at the same time, grabbed the hardwood wine cup and smashed it on her head. Then, she blacked out and fell into a pool of blood, completely losing consciousness. Not long after she fainted, 7 or 8 people wearing the same hard leather armor and holding daggers and short swords walked in from the main door. The guy in the lead glanced at the miserable situation in the hall, and his pupils instantly shrank. He sighed in disbelief. Oh, my God, this is no different from a slaughterhouse. The person who did this must be crazy. That's right. No matter who did this, there's definitely something wrong with his head. Look at the middle-aged fatty on the ground. His name is Lear, a weapons merchant who owns 3 ships and more than 100 valiant sailors. Even the guild leaders have to greet him politely when they see him. And that Baldy over there, he's one of the largest grain merchants in the city. Another man echoed his companion and quickly identified the deceased. His expression was incomparably solemn. This was because he knew the enormous power behind the corpses in front of him. Once the news of their death spread, the entire Valen city would be in an uproar, especially the alliance formed by the smugglers. They would definitely put pressure on the Pirate King and the underground guilds. The consequences would be unimaginable if the culprit was not caught as soon as possible. However, not everyone knew the severity of the situation like him. A young man who looked to be about 23 or 24 years old squatted down and gently opened the wounds. He mocked in a slightly sarcastic tone. So they're all big shots with power and influence. I really don't know who they've provoked to suddenly be massacred. Judging from the fatal wounds, it should be the mercenaries who fought with us just now. You mean, those 3 mercenaries attacked this tavern and then madly charged out to take us down with them? The man in the lead asked with furrowed brows. At least from the traces on the corpses, that's the only explanation for now. But I can only come to a conclusion after I've checked all the corpses. The young man shrugged and replied carelessly. Just as the man in the lead was about to say something, the person who was searching the room suddenly shouted, "Quick, come over. I found a survivor." Judging from her attire, she should be a waitress of the tavern. She might know something. Hearing this, the man in the lead instantly became excited. He clenched his fists and replied loudly, "Well done. Use the fastest method to wake her up. I need to know why the mercenaries went crazy immediately, and what's the motive of the people who launched this attack. Leader, there's no need to go through so much trouble. She's already woken up on her own. If you have any questions, just ask her directly. She can hear you." As he spoke, the member of the underground guild slowly helped Jiria up and brought her before the man in the lead. At the same time, he lowered his voice and warned, "Girl, I think you should know who we are and how we do things. Tell us everything you know honestly, or else, don't kill me. Just ask whatever you want to know. I promise I'll tell you the truth." Jiria trembled all over, her eyes revealing unconcealable fear. Chapter 563. Of course, half of these feelings were real. After all, the underground guilds had always been vicious and merciless. Normal people would be afraid of them. However, the other half was fake. The girl knew that if she wanted to leave safely, she had to reduce her presence as much as possible. Otherwise, she might be taken away and locked up. The leader was obviously satisfied with the deterrent effect of the guild's name. His expression instantly became kinder as he patted the girl's shoulder. "Relax. As long as you tell me everything you know, I promise I won't make things difficult for you. I can even satisfy some of your requests. Now, tell me what happened in this tavern. Who killed the smugglers? And what's with those crazy mercenaries who rushed out just now?" A massacre. A premeditated massacre. Two strangers wrapped in cloaks walked in and spoke a few words with the tavern's most famous swindler, Jace. Then, for some reason, they suddenly got into a conflict with the smugglers. What followed was a fierce scuffle. Not long after the fight started, I was knocked unconscious by something hard, so I didn't know the final result. Terrifying, too terrifying. There was blood everywhere. Whoa. Angelia purposely spoke incoherently about the entire process. She looked like an ordinary person who had been severely traumatized. In order to not arouse the other party's suspicion, she even used the unique technique of crying, which was unique to women. One had to admit that even though it sounded a little vulgar, the effect was pretty good. When a man in the lead saw that the young maid was crying, he immediately frowned subconsciously and gave a look to his companion beside him. There was no doubt that he was not very good at dealing with this kind of situation, and the sound of sobbing especially annoyed him. The man who was supporting Angelia shrugged helplessly and comforted her softly. "Hey, girl, calm down. It's over. The sooner you tell us everything, the sooner you can return home to take a bath and have a good sleep. When you wake up, you can treat it as a nightmare." "That's right. I had a nightmare. What happened just now wasn't real. Illusion. I must have seen an illusion." Angelia quickly wiped her tears and began to talk to herself nervously. It was as if she had been greatly traumatized and her rationality was rapidly collapsing. "Damn it. Boss, if you still have any questions, you better hurry up. I think this girl might go crazy in a while." Another guild member noticed the girl talking to herself and immediately lowered his voice to remind her. Without saying a word, the man in the lead walked up to the bar counter, picked up a bottle of the strongest aged wine, pinched Jaria's chin, and poured it all into her mouth. Jaria choked and coughed nonstop. Then snot, tears, and the undigested food in her stomach all spurted out. In an instant, the tavern that was filled with the smell of blood had a sour stench. Staring at the young maid who was coughing nonstop, there was not a trace of pity in this guy's eyes. It was as cold as a block of ice. After a full 2 or 3 minutes, he asked in a neither fast nor slow tone, "How is it? Are you sober now? If you are, then continue to answer my questions. Remember, don't try to escape and don't try to hide anything. I'm the guild's dark enforcer. I'm proficient in all sorts of torture methods. Even if you've really gone mad, I have ways to make you talk. Cough, cough, cough. I am sorry. That's all I know. As for why those mercenaries suddenly went crazy, I think it's because the other party suddenly shot out 3 red lights from his hand." Jaria was really scared this time. She realized that it was useless to pretend to be pitiful, so she could only reveal some valuable information. "Red lights?" The self-proclaimed dark enforcer's eyes lit up. He turned around and asked his companion who was inspecting the corpses, "Hey, Richie, do you know what those red lights are? Arcane spells? Divine spells? Innate abilities or magical items?" The man called Richie pondered for a dozen seconds before raising his head and replying, "Judging from the fearless gazes of those mercenaries, they should be under the control of an enchantment spell. A low-level charm person definitely wouldn't be able to achieve such an effect. It would require at least level 3 Berserk Charm or a higher level Dominate person. If the other party did not rely on a powerful magical item, then his spellcasting level would be at least level 7 or even higher. Whether it's a priest, a wizard, or a warlock, his strength is very dangerous. It's far beyond what we can handle. I personally suggest that we report this matter to the leaders immediately. Normally, a spellcaster like this wouldn't appear for no reason, nor would he kill a group of smugglers for no reason." After hearing his companion's analysis, the Dark Enforcer's expression turned grave. "You mean, what I mean is that something big is about to happen in Valen City. Don't you understand? This is the signal for war. No matter who is behind all of this, their target is definitely not the smugglers, but us, the pirate alliance that rules this archipelago." Richie was obviously very smart. He could tell at a glance that the ones who would suffer the most from the sudden deaths of so many smugglers were not others, but the pirates and the underground guilds. If they were unable to catch the culprit and appease the smugglers' alliance, then the prosperous trade and supply of goods on this archipelago might be affected. Moreover, the pirates were about to carry out a large-scale operation, so a series of serious chain reactions would erupt if something went wrong. War? This is Valence City. Who dares to start a war against us? The Dark Enforcer opened his eyes wide and shouted in disbelief. Richie lightly shook his head. I don't know. Perhaps you should ask that young lady. I feel like she's hiding something. The Dark Enforcer turned his head and glared fiercely at Jiraiya. He then grabbed her slender neck and roared, Speak. What else do you know? Tell me immediately. Otherwise, I'll chop off your limbs and sell them to the brothels. I'm sure those perverts would love to see you lying naked on the bed and being ravaged, screaming and wailing day and night. No, please don't be like this. I'll speak. They mentioned that they were hired by the Rat Men, and there were a lot of them. Their goal was to create chaos in the city. It was obvious that Jiraiya's psychological defenses had completely collapsed. She blurted out everything she had overheard. Even though she didn't want to betray Andre at first, what could a weak girl like her do under the threat of the other party? Chapter 564. Survival. This was a serious and cruel topic, especially for those who lived in harsh environments. They would do anything to survive, and betrayal were common. Although Angelia was very grateful to Andre for giving her a chance to start anew, and even felt a trace of infatuation and adoration, in the face of survival, she chose to give up on the former without hesitation. This was because all the residents of Valence City knew that if they wanted to change their fate, they had to survive first. Of course, this girl didn't know that everything she had heard and seen was all misinformation that Andre had purposely left behind to mislead the underground guilds. After all, the difference in intelligence between the two was too great. Angelia was the one being used from the start. She was the only one who didn't know and thought that she had met a good person. Andre's goal was very simple. He wanted to force the Ratmen to break off their relationship with the underground guilds as soon as possible. It would be best if they could set up a big battle. This way, he could save a lot of brain cells and shift his focus to the pirates. After all, the upcoming naval battle that would decide the entire situation of the Southern Seas was what he was truly concerned about. It would be fine if Lincoln City's navy won, but if they were annihilated, then he would have to do his best to take over the Pirate Alliance's inheritance in order to deal with the remnants of Bakarov City's fleet. From a certain perspective, he only had one true enemy, and that was the old Lich's apprentice, one of the 4 powerful dukes of Lincoln City, Loretta Botons. Ratmen? You're saying that the Ratmen are the masterminds behind this massacre? The Dark Enforcer felt terrible after hearing the girl's answer. His 2 strong hands even trembled slightly, and he immediately let go of the girl's slender neck. Perhaps others didn't know how terrifying the Ratmen hiding in the docks were, but as someone who had personally participated in many ambushes, he knew that if the Ratmen decided to go to war, it would bring disaster to Valence City. Angelia, who finally had a chance to catch her breath, panted heavily and nodded fearfully. That's right. I heard it clearly. They said that the Ratman King felt that his life was coming to an end, so he decided to fight to the death for the survival of his race. Oh, damn it. This is probably the worst news I've ever heard in my life. Ricky groaned as he slapped his forehead, but in less than a minute, he pulled himself together and suggested, Guys, I don't think there's a need to continue investigating the smuggler's murderer. The most important thing now is to figure out if this information is accurate. If it's true, then we have to start preparing for war. As senior members, I believe you have all read the information about the Rat King, Bernie Ecclestone. I have to remind you that he is an extremely dangerous person. He once almost uprooted the guild. The leaders want to kill him all the time, but for so many years, they have not had a chance to do so. Also, according to the information I received recently, one of his grandsons seems to be planning an attack on the senior members of the guild. Although he hasn't made a move yet, he has already obtained a list of names. Perhaps our names are on it. Bastard, where did he get the list? Doesn't the guild keep the identity of its high-ranking members a secret? Another guy heard that his real identity might be exposed in front of the enemy and immediately jumped up and cursed loudly. He didn't dare to imagine what he would do if the Ratman's attack affected his family. He wasn't the only one who had similar thoughts. Almost all the members present had an ugly expression on their faces. In just a few seconds, the atmosphere had become so heavy that it was difficult to breathe. Seeing that his companions were getting more and more nervous, the Dark Enforcer took a deep breath. He knew that if this continued, the morale of the members would be gone. So, he clenched his fists and said seriously, "Since the situation has become so bad, we have to take action immediately. First, I have to return to the guild and report everything that happened here to the leaders. Ricky, you are responsible for taking the rest of the people to investigate the Ratman's movements. Remember, no matter what unusual actions they take, you must remain calm. Don't launch an attack, because we are not ready for war yet. Delay as long as possible. Don't worry, I'm not an idiot. I know when to take action and when to endure. You also try to be careful. Didn't that girl say that there are many assassins lurking in every corner of the city? They may launch an assassination operation against the guild at any time." After saying that, Ricky bumped fists with the Dark Enforcer and left through the back door with the rest of the members. 10 seconds later, they disappeared into the night. After watching his companions leave, the Dark Enforcer didn't even look at the young maid who was curled up in the corner. He walked through the main door alone and headed toward the underground guild headquarters. Perhaps under normal circumstances, he wouldn't mind imprisoning Jiria and having fun with her for a few weeks to completely release the beast desire that had accumulated in his heart. However, the current situation was critical, and he didn't have such thoughts. He didn't dare to delay for even a second. If the guild was defeated by the Ratman, with the crimes he had committed over the years, he would definitely be torn to pieces by his enemies. The sea breeze of the night passed through the broken windows and door cracks and blew into the tavern, filled with sticky blood and corpses. The only living person inside couldn't help but shiver. At the same time, it also awakened her stiff body and mind. Phew, 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 phew. This is too scary. I have to leave this place immediately. I have to leave this city of sin. Jiria muttered to herself as she touched the dark red handprint on her neck. A few minutes later, she casually took some valuables and ran toward the ship's ticket store. There was only one thought in her mind right now, and that was to escape. Run as far as she could. The Underground Guild was indeed worthy of being the ruler of Valen City. Less than half an hour after the news was sent back, a large number of members armed with weapons appeared on the streets. Although they had yet to seal off the entire city or conduct house-to-house searches, just standing there was enough of a deterrent force. Many thieves, hoodlums, and ruffians saw that the situation wasn't good and quickly returned to their residences. They locked their doors and windows tightly and carefully observed the situation outside. Apart from that, the guards outside the Ratman's territory had also secretly increased by several times. Some places even had ballistae deployed. Without a doubt, Andre's scheme had succeeded. Regardless of whether they would fight in the end, the fragile trust between the Ratman and the Underground Guild had completely collapsed. It was only a matter of time before they fell out. Chapter 565. With the activation of the defense mechanism, the bloated and huge machine that was the Underground Guild Alliance began to display its overwhelming power. In less than an hour, they had taken control of the entire city. Although the actions of a large number of subordinate guilds appeared to be very disorderly, the people sent by the few large guilds were quite elite. This was especially true for those who wore tight black leather armor and held small round shields and short swords. Once they found a suspicious target, they would immediately rush up and press them to the ground. A few outsiders who were confident in their strength tried to resist, but they were subdued within a few seconds. Their superb martial arts and skillful cooperation gave people the illusion that they were soldiers, not gang members. Of course, such aimless arrests like this had no effect at all, except to warn those who were ready to make trouble in the dark. For example, Andre, who had just started a massacre in the Hiccup Dragon Tavern, was now sitting in an open-air stall not far from the free market, eating steaming hot fried fish not paying attention to the fierce eyes of the guild members around him. Even Bordia, who had always been bold, could not help but secretly admire him for being able to eat supper calmly. As for the famous liar Jace, he had now regained his senses. He suppressed the fear in his heart and followed behind obediently, not daring to ask anyone for help at all. This was because he knew that he was destined to be involved in this matter just by the fact that so many influential smugglers had died in the tavern. No matter how he tried to explain, he could not avoid death in the end. He might as well try to see if he could rely on these two ruthless young people in front of him. Hey, you've been sitting here for an hour and have eaten 2 plates of fried fish. Don't you intend to explain? Due to the nature of the halfling, Bordia's patience had never been good, so she could not help but ask first. Andre smiled and shook his head, passing a golden fried fish to her. Try it. The taste is really good. The first bite is crispy and soft, followed by a fresh fragrance that instantly stimulates the taste buds, making you feel like you can't stop eating. I bet that the owner of this shop used animal fat. Otherwise, the fragrance would not be so rich. Damn it. Now is not the time to talk about food. Hurry up and answer my question. What are you thinking? What are you planning to do next? I believe you've seen it for yourself. The Underground Guild has already entered a state of battle preparation. Old Bernie's side is probably about the same. You can't be planning on watching them fight without doing anything, right? Out of concern for her friend, Portia appeared to be a little impatient. She did not dare to imagine how serious the consequences would be if the Ratmen and the Underground Guild started a full-scale war in the city. No matter who won in the end, the aged Ratman King would definitely meet his death. After all, he was too old and his skills had deteriorated greatly. He could no longer deal with the endless stream of assassins as easily as before. Once the Underground Guild decided to eliminate him at all costs, his life would enter the final countdown. Staring at the huge-breasted Loli's nervous expression, Andre swallowed the food in his mouth and explained in a playful manner, "Calm down. Don't worry, they won't fight." First of all, the Underground Guild were not prepared for war at all. Take a look at their reaction tonight. They were purposely showing off their strength in an attempt to scare off the enemy. Think about it carefully. If they were really prepared, would they still be so careful and put on a posture of, "I'm very powerful"? If it were me, I would directly mobilize my forces and launch a surprise attack on the area controlled by the Ratman. I would use a sudden and fierce attack to completely destroy the cave where Old Bernie is hiding. As long as this legendary Ratman King dies, the rest of the fellows are nothing to worry about. All we have to do is slowly squeeze their living space. Similarly, the Ratmen also do not want to engage in this meaningless war. What they desire the most right now is to maintain the status quo and slowly manage their own territory to accumulate strength. When the difference in strength between the two sides is not so obvious, then they can start to expand outwards little by little. Since both sides are not prepared, then this war will naturally not start. At least for 10 days to half a month, there will be peace. As for after that, that will depend on the Ratman King's own choice. You know that I am not a particularly greedy person, and I also like to share wealth and power with my friends. If he is willing to join us, I will always welcome him with open arms. After listening to these words, an expression of sudden realization appeared on Portia's face. She then muttered to herself, "Oh, I think I understand a little. Everything you've done today is to force that old man to make a choice. Otherwise, you'll continue to create similar disturbances until they fight." That's right. You are very smart, but your patience is a bit lacking. All right, eat some fried fish now. I didn't lie to you. The taste is really good. As he spoke, Andre reached out and patted the little fellow's head. Oof. Of course I am smart enough. Otherwise, how could I become the king of thieves in Valence City? Also, you are not allowed to touch my head in the future. I heard that having your head touched often will cause you to not grow tall. Portia protested to Andre as she grabbed the fragrant fried fish and stuffed it into her mouth. Knowing that her old friend would be fine, she immediately relaxed. She only had one friend anyway, and the lives of the other Ratmen had nothing to do with her. Coupled with the tempting taste of the food, she finally couldn't help but cast aside all her worries and focus on eating. Seeing the other party wolfing down the food, Andre retorted in a joking tone, "Grow tall? Ha ha! This is the funniest joke I've heard in a while. Let's not talk about the fact that you're already over 20 years old and have long passed the peak period of reproduction. Just the racial restriction of the halfling alone makes it impossible for you to grow more than 1 meter." Portia rolled her eyes and made a rude gesture with her right middle finger. It was very rare for her to not retort, because her mouth was already stuffed with fish and she couldn't speak at all. "All right, eat your fish. It just so happens that I want to have a chat with this dear swindler. I hope he can understand his current situation." With that, Andre turned around and stared at Jess with a smile that wasn't a smile. After a full minute, he finally opened his mouth to greet him. "Good evening, friend. I'm very sorry to have involved you in a rather dangerous matter, but there's no helping it. Who told you to be the only intermediary who can contact Clarissa Bessemer? If you don't mind, can you introduce yourself so that we can understand each other better?" Chapter 566. Jesse Parrott, that's my name. I believe you should already know. In addition, I'm 37 years old this year. I have no family, no children, no parents, no relatives. I'm alone in this chaotic city. I'm not a strong warrior, let alone a battle-hardened mercenary. I'm just an ordinary person with good eloquence. My main profession is a swindler, and my secondary profession is a middleman. Of course, maybe you're wondering why a smart woman like Clarissa Bessemer would choose me to be her only contact. In fact, the reason is very simple. On the night her father was killed, I happened to pass by and save her life. In return, I can always earn a stable reward by introducing clients. Especially in the case where I can't find prey, it can ensure that I don't have to starve or sleep on the streets for the time being. However, that's all there is to our relationship. We're not as close as outsiders think. I haven't even seen her take off her veil for several years. I don't even know if this woman who calls herself Clarissa is the real her. As an excellent swindler, Jesse was very good at reading people's faces. After such a long observation, he found that Andre's character was not as violent as when he killed unscrupulously in the tavern. Moreover, everything he did had an extremely strong purpose. His intelligence was also astonishingly high. He simply played the underground guild and the rat men in the palm of his hand. In order to save his own life, he didn't dare to hide anything at all. He directly said all the things that the other party might be interested in. Then, he sat on the bench and waited silently for the result. "So, you and Clarissa became partners only because of coincidence." After being silent for about half a minute, Andre suddenly asked with a tone full of doubt. Obviously, he didn't quite believe this melodramatic explanation, not to mention that the other party was an out-and-out swindler. If he believed it easily, he would be an idiot. Jesse also understood that his profession was indeed difficult to gain people's trust, so he explained with a bitter smile, "Yes, it was a complete coincidence. At that time, I lived less than 50 meters away from her house. That night, I suddenly heard a fierce quarrel outside. When I opened the window, it turned out that her father was fighting with a strange man. It seemed that they were snatching an old notebook. Clarissa Bessemer, who was only about 10 years old, was terrified. She tried her best to help her father, but unfortunately, before she could get close, she was kicked away by the stranger and rolled into a ditch by the roadside. Then, the stranger took out a sharp weapon and stabbed her father in the chest before fleeing in a hurry. Out of curiosity, I quietly left the house to check on the scene. I realized that her father had lost too much blood and was on his last breath. Clarissa had also fainted from drowning. She kept mumbling a name, Neil Grant, who was the current first mate of the Sea Wolf. What was strange was that this guy obviously didn't have the amazing swordsmanship that people later praised. It could even be said that he didn't understand swordsmanship at all. But when he reappeared a few years later, he was already a famous swordsman in Valen City. I once asked Clarissa about this matter, but I didn't get any answer. She refused to discuss the cause of her father's death with anyone. What was even stranger was that Neil Grant also didn't choose to kill her. There seemed to be some kind of tacit understanding between the two, or perhaps an agreement. "I'm very sorry," But that's all I know. If you want to know more, you'll have to ask the two people involved. Other than them, I don't think there's a third person who knows what happened that night. After saying this, Jesse didn't pay attention to Andre's reaction and directly grabbed a fried fish from Portia's plate and stuffed it into his mouth. He had already revealed all the secrets he knew. It was up to others whether they believed him or not. The most important thing now was to fill their stomachs. At the very least, they couldn't die on an empty stomach even if they had to. Without a doubt, this was a typical gambler's mentality. At the same time, it was also a manifestation of the wisdom of a small character. Their lives were already under their control anyway. Rather than worrying for nothing, they might as well completely let it go, eat, drink, and live every minute comfortably. Andre admired people who could let go of things easily. He smiled and nodded. Thank you very much for your detailed explanation. I more or less have a general understanding of your relationship with Clarissa. Don't worry, I won't kill you, but I won't let you go either. At least not before I see Clarissa Bessemer. It's all right. I'm very clear about my current situation. Even if you let me go, I'll find a way to stay. Because once I don't have your protection, I won't be able to walk more than a few streets before I'll be captured by the people of the Underground Guild and locked in a dark cell. I'll never be able to see the sky outside again. Jesse ate the fried fish with relish and shrugged his shoulders indifferently. There wasn't the slightest bit of worry about the future on his face. It was as though he had experienced similar dangerous situations many times. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so calm. Not bad. To be able to understand this, it means that you're a rare smart person. But how can you be sure that I'll protect you? Or rather, why don't I just kill you after I've finished using you? Andre probed with interest. He wanted to see what kind of different answer this uncle who was stuck in a quagmire would give. Ignoring Portia's angry eyes, Jesse quickly grabbed another hot fried fish and stuffed it into his mouth. As he chewed and swallowed, he pointed to his eyes. Because I can see that you're utilitarian through and through. You won't easily abandon someone who's useful to you. And I happen to be very useful to you, at least before you see Clarissa Bessemer. As for the future, I'll slowly prove my worth. Hearing these confident remarks, Andre smiled. He smiled very happily. Ha ha ha. Well said. I like your confidence, and I like your intelligence even more. As for whether you're really useful, let's wait and see. Don't worry, I will never let anyone down. You will soon see my value. Saying this, Jess wiped the oil on his mouth, stood up, and bowed politely. No, you don't have to wait that long. You can prove your worth now. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a kid standing there waiting for more than 10 minutes. If I'm not wrong, he should be the one who came to deliver the letter to you. Go, bring back the meeting address. I can't wait to meet this woman who's proficient in 12 languages. She's a true genius. After saying that, Andre turned his head slightly and waved at the dirty little boy hiding behind the bulletin board with a smile. Chapter 567. Perhaps it was out of fear of strangers, or perhaps it was Clarissa's instructions, but when the boy realized that someone had noticed him, he immediately shrank his neck in fear and turned to run away. But before he could run a few steps, Jace immediately chased after him and pulled him back. He scolded jokingly, "Damn little monkey, why are you running? Don't tell me you don't even recognize me?" I'm sorry, Mr. Jace. You should know the rules. There must be no outsiders present when we meet. I'm just following rules, so I can't give you the address now. After that, the boy clenched the note in his hand tightly and refused to hand it over. Silly child, rules are dead, but people are alive. Do you think I would still harm Clarissa? Here, I'll treat you to fried fish. Hurry up and take out the address. The guests are still waiting. Jace had obviously expected the boy's reaction. He deliberately showed a friendly smile and handed him a golden fried fish. The tempting fragrance made the boy swallow his saliva subconsciously. A deep desire appeared on his skinny face, especially his two blue eyes. There was nothing but fried fish. For a child like him who was severely malnourished and in a half-hungry state all year round, he was completely unable to resist the temptation of fried food. His stomach even began to grumble uncontrollably. Needless to say, he had not eaten anything for at least 5 hours. Struggle. There was an obvious struggle in the boy's eyes. On one hand, it was a long-term stable job as a messenger. As long as he followed the rules, he would always have food to eat and would not starve to death on the streets like other children. But on the other hand, there was a strong physiological need. No one could resist the erosion of hunger. Even the most strong-willed adult was no exception, not to mention that he was far from being underage. After struggling fiercely in his heart for about a minute, the boy finally could not resist the temptation of food. He raised his head, licked his dry lips with his tongue, and said, "Sir, this one in front of me is not enough for me to break the rules because it's not worth losing a stable job for a mere fish. But if you can guarantee that I can eat delicious fried fish every day for the next month, then I'm willing to temporarily forget the rules and give this note to you." Ha ha ha, what a likable kid. All right, I agree to your conditions. Jess laughed as he took out a dozen silver coins from his waist pouch and placed them on the two dark little hands. With the prices in Linton City, this money was enough for the boy to eat 3 meals a day for 1 to 2 months. After all, as a port city, fish was originally a relatively cheap commodity. In addition, the fish used for frying were small fish that could not be sold. A plate of fish only cost a few copper coins, which was almost the same as hard black bread. It was a snack that ordinary people could afford. Seeing the silver coins shining with white light, the boy instantly became very excited. He immediately counted them carefully and put each one in his mouth. After confirming that there were no fake coins, he handed over the paper slip and bowed deeply at the same time. "Thank you for your generosity. This is the address, and the password is Moonlight Dance. Finally, I wish you a good business deal." "Big business?" Jess turned around and glanced at Andre's half-smiling face. He sighed softly. "AI, it is indeed a big business deal. I've never done a bigger business deal in my life." The boy didn't hear the helplessness and bitterness in his voice. After putting the silver coins into his pocket, he snatched the fried fish and turned to run, disappearing around the corner of the street in a few short seconds. In reality, there were quite a number of homeless children like him in Valley City. Some of them had their parents killed and had no choice but to run errands and steal without any capital, barely ensuring that they wouldn't starve to death. Another group was the result of some sort of mistake between prostitutes and their clients. Most of them were sold to human traffickers as soon as they were born and would be sold to clients who needed them when they were slightly older. For example, smugglers were gangs that needed to raise loyal and devoted fighters. Orphans were obviously a good choice. Another example would be some special service industries that needed young and beautiful girls. They would often become toys for the rich when they were around 12 or 13 years old. Finally, a small group would be forced to drink drugs and turn into mindless beasts. One had to know that the word pity didn't exist in Valley City. Everything, including people, was treated as a resource. Since it was a resource, it had to be fully utilized. Children happened to be the most efficient part of the entire chain. Jess had also been a homeless child and knew how unbearable that feeling was, so he didn't mind the boy taking advantage of the opportunity to extort him. After watching the skinny figure run out of sight, he opened a rolled-up parchment and saw the words written on it: "Upper City, Frenzied Fields, the innermost room on the 3rd floor. Remember, you must arrive before midnight, or you won't be able to see me." After reading the contents of the parchment, the corners of Jess's mouth rose slightly. He lowered his voice and muttered to himself, "Frenzied Fields? That's a great place to have fun, but isn't it a bit too noisy as a meeting place? Oh, damn it. Frenzied Fields? Are you sure it's this place? From what I know, that's the most expensive brothel in all of Valley City. The men who go in won't leave until they pay the last copper coin." Portia had left her seat at some point and was standing behind Jess, expressing her opinion while eating. Even though she was a thief and had visited most of the safes in the city, she had never entered the Frenzied Fields. That was because this brothel was a place for the rich to party. Any woman with a bit of shame would never take half a step into it. Jess spread out his hands and replied with a smile, Even though I'm a bit suspicious, but Clarissa has never made a mistake in this aspect. Let's go. There's not much time left until midnight. I don't want to be late." Since that's the case, let's go to the frenzied fields. Besides, I'm not sure if the underground guilds will take any more drastic actions in a few dozen minutes. It'll be troublesome if the streets are sealed off. Andre didn't want to waste any time on the meeting place. In his opinion, no matter what the frenzied fields was, it had nothing to do with him. He was going to see Clarissa Bessemer and decipher the contents of the parchment. As for what the place was for, it didn't matter in the slightest. Chapter 568. Valen City at night was like a huge and chaotic prison. Every person walking on the streets was a prisoner of this prison. They had nowhere to hide and nowhere to hide. The only thing they could do was pick up their weapons and do their best to protect themselves or steal from others in order to live a better life. Although the underground guilds had sent out a large number of people to maintain law and order, it was a drop in the bucket for a city with tens of thousands of people living in it. This was especially true in the dark alleys, where there was no shortage of violent incidents. Andre's group took less than 20 minutes to travel from the free market to the upper city. They encountered 2 or 3 waves of bandits blocking their way. Of course, their fates were similar to the smugglers in the Hiccup Dragon Tavern. They either had their hearts pierced by sharp swords or had a gash on their necks. Andre, who desperately wanted to see Clarissa Bessemer, didn't hold back in the slightest. He displayed his advantage in speed and agility to his heart's content. His razor-sharp rapier was like the tongue of a venomous snake, each strike accurately hitting a vital point. His opponents often felt a sharp pain in the time it took them to be distracted, followed by their vision turning black as they completely lost consciousness. His terrifying killing efficiency not only caused Jess to feel fear from the bottom of his heart, but even Bortia revealed an expression of surprise. This wasn't to say that Andre's fighting ability was greater than a halfling thief's, but that his movements were more concise and faster, and were more lethal against weaker enemies. It was like a dagger could pierce a person's heart in half a second, while a heavy hammer would take more than 2 seconds to shatter an unlucky person's head. The former might be more efficient, but it would be difficult to display its power against someone wearing heavy armor. The latter didn't care what kind of armor one was wearing, since a single strike from the hammer would create a hole even if one was wearing full plate armor. It was obvious that a dagger was equivalent to Andre, a level 1 rogue swordsman, and a hammer was equivalent to a halfling thief. If the two were to fight for real, Andre wouldn't be a match for the big-breasted lowly. Wow. Your performance today left a deep impression. Bortia came over and joked as soon as the battle ended. However, Andre wasn't in the mood to joke around. He shrugged and turned to Jace. How far are we from a frenzied wilderness? Look at the 3-story building with the bronze statue in front of you. It's the holy land in the hearts of all men in this city, the frenzied wilderness. You better have enough money on you, or we won't even be able to get in. Perhaps Clarissa Bessemer chose this place to get rid of clients who aren't rich enough. With that, Jess raised his arm and pointed to a brightly lit place a few streets away. At the place he was pointing at, there was a naked female statue placed in the middle of the fountain. Just from the beautiful lines and the half-hidden key parts, it was easy to tell that it was definitely made by a famous artist. If it was put up for auction, it would be worth at least 3,000 to 5,000 gold coins. Apart from that, the light used on the eaves of the door wasn't an ordinary torch or oil lamp, but a genuine rank 2 arcane spell, Inextinguishable Flames. The effect of this spell was to create a magical flame that burned forever on a specific object. Even though it only had visual effects and didn't produce any heat, it was as its name suggested. The effect was almost permanent. At least, it could continue burning without casting a dispelling spell. Most importantly, one had to be at least a rank 3 mage to cast this spell. It was so expensive that many noble families would have to think twice before purchasing it. Usually, only the tombs of kings or dukes would use inextinguishable flames. The main purpose was to make it convenient for the tomb keeper to protect the grave goods from being patronized by grave robbers. As a mage, Andre was very clear about the price of various spells. Just the decorations and lighting at the entrance of the frenzied wilderness were worth more than 8,000 gold coins. If the large golden pearl emitting a gentle light on the ceiling of the hall was included, it could be said to be extremely luxurious. Staring at the women wearing sexy dresses and strange masks at the entrance, Andre instantly understood why this place was called the Holy Land of Men. A sense of mystery, novelty, and excitement. Everything a man wanted from a woman could be enjoyed here, especially since all the women working here had clearly received strict training and education. Whether it was their speech, actions, or temperament, they all gave people the illusion that they were noble and inviolable. It was enough to arouse a man's desire to conquer that was hidden in his genes. Without a doubt, the frenzied wilderness was mainly targeted at those who had money but couldn't obtain the corresponding social status. Smugglers, pirate captains, vice captains, high-ranking members of underground guilds. Occasionally, there would be a few hoodlums who wanted to improve their taste. Only men with an extreme sense of inferiority would want to find confidence and satisfaction by toying with arrogant women. Interesting. A high-class brothel full of debauchery and depravity, built to satisfy some twisted and sick desires. But as a secret meeting place, it can be said to be perfect. Andre muttered to himself with a playful smile as he pulled on his hood and walked towards the entrance. The closer he got to the destination, the more he discovered how outstanding Clarissa Bessemer was. This woman's grasp of the human heart was beyond imagination. She had chosen the frenzied wilderness for a reason. First, just as Jess had said, it was to get rid of customers who lack financial resources. After all, just a meeting would cost dozens or even hundreds of Alliance gold coins. If they weren't particularly rich, they would definitely choose to give up immediately. Second, everyone here, regardless of gender or age, was wearing a mask. Once they noticed that the situation was not good, they could quickly escape by blending into the crowd, greatly guaranteeing their own safety. Third, the lascivious atmosphere stimulated the secretion of hormones. Regardless of whether the person was male or female, they would more or less be affected. If they were distracted during the negotiation process, they would definitely be ruthlessly taken advantage of. To sum up, Andre dared to bet that the meeting place in the frenzied wilderness wasn't a coincidence. After careful consideration, Clarissa had already set up a trap, and he was the one who had stepped into it. Podia's senses had always been very sharp. She immediately sensed the excitement hidden under Andre's calm appearance. She hurriedly ran to him and asked in a low voice, "Is there trouble?" Chapter 569. Haha, no, it's just a little game of wits. I think this dear lady will give us a hard time. No matter what happens later, don't make a sound. Leave everything to me. After saying that, Andre casually tossed a small bag of 60 gold coins to the guard at the door and walked into the hall without looking back. But before he could take more than a few steps, a strong guard quickly caught up with him and stopped him. With a bitter smile, the guard explained, "I'm very sorry, sir. Although the entrance fee is very generous, any guest who wishes to enter the frenzied wilderness must wear a mask. This is a rule that we have always adhered to since the opening of the shop. Moreover, it is better to protect the privacy of every guest. I personally suggest that you go to the stall over there and choose a mask that suits your temperament. On one hand, it can increase your charm, and on the other, it can increase your interest. Don't you think that wearing a mask and being intimate with beautiful ladies will be a different experience? Of course, if your two followers want to enter, they will have to wear a mask as well. No one is an exception. Perhaps it was the mysterious power released by the jingling gold coins in the bag, but the guard's tone was unusually polite. He didn't neglect the other party just because he looked very young, and his attitude was quite comfortable. Mask? You mean something like the ones at the door? I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in, and I don't want to wear any deceptive accessories. You can't be thinking that wearing a mask can really hide my identity, right? Andre purposely acted very frivolous, looking at the people around him with eyes full of disdain. At this moment, he looked like a spoiled young man, his whole body emitting a rebellious aura. The guard, who had seen many different kinds of guests, had obviously encountered a similar situation before. He calmly revealed a professional smile, and then faked a helpless sigh. Sigh? You're right. A mask can't hide your identity, but it can add a lot of mystery. At the very least, it can make you not so easily recognized. Also, please believe me when I say that wearing a mask will definitely add a lot of interest to you. Don't you think that the ladies become more attractive after wearing a mask? There was no doubt that he was trying to use words to persuade the guests to follow the rules here. After all, the entrance fee was only 10 gold coins per person, and 60 gold coins was double the normal price. He didn't want to give up such a generous tip. Andre purposely glanced at the high-class prostitutes and nodded. Indeed, just like you said, they look even more alluring than when they're naked. Just like what a friend of mine once said, a woman's most beautiful and sexy moment is always between half naked and half naked. Sometimes, a small amount of covering won't have any effect. Instead, it will make men more excited. Hearing this, a look of admiration appeared in the security guard's eyes. He immediately bowed and said, "Your friend must be a great person. The number of his lovers may be more than the number of women I have ever seen. This is simply the life of every man's dream." Ha ha, that's right. He was indeed such a person. Well, you're good with words, so I've decided to accept your suggestion. Now help me pick 3 masks. Andre laughed and threw a small bag of 60 gold coins to the guard. His actions gave people the illusion that he was spending money like water. No one disliked money, and no one would refuse to receive 60 gold coins for running errands. The guard untied the rope and glanced at the glittering alliance currency. He was so happy that his eyes narrowed into slits. Without saying a word, he turned around and ran to the place where the masks were sold. His movements were as fast as the wind, as if he was afraid that Andre would go back on his words. He had just run less than 15 meters when Portia, who had been standing silently at the side, immediately asked, "Hey, are you crazy? You actually gave this guy 120 gold coins as soon as he entered the door. That's gold coins, not silver coins, and not copper coins. That's right, you're too extravagant. To deal with a low-level guard like this, you only need to tip him a few silver coins." Jess echoed. Obviously, the two of them did not know why Andre was doing this and what his goal was. If not for the wisdom he had shown before, he would have been crowned with the title of a prodigal by now. A few silver coins? Haha, a few silver coins won't achieve the effect I want. Watch carefully. My little game with Clarissa Bessemer began the moment I stepped through the door. After saying this meaningful sentence, Andre ignored the two of them and silently observed the structure of the hall, as well as where each staircase and corridor led to. But before he could see anything, the guard ran back with 3 different masks and said breathlessly, "The mask you wanted, I specially chose a silver eye mask for you. Coupled with your handsome face, I believe that as long as you're a woman, you will definitely be deeply mesmerized. The other 2 clown masks were prepared for your 2 followers. After all, even the most excellent of servants can't overshadow their master's limelight. Are you satisfied with this?" After taking the silver eye mask, Andre briefly looked at the workmanship and immediately put it on. He did not feel any discomfort and quickly revealed a satisfied smile on his face. Good taste. This little thing has a unique design and exquisite workmanship. Most importantly, it can set off my noble temperament. Oh, by the way, can I ask how to get to the 3rd floor? I have an appointment with a friend to meet in the innermost room on the 3rd floor. If it's convenient, please lead the way. I don't want to go to the wrong room and ruin other people's plans. The 3rd floor. Are you sure your friend is on the 3rd floor? The guard asked in surprise with his mouth wide open. If I remember correctly, he should be on the 3rd floor. Why? Is the 3rd floor not open to the public? Andre pretended to be innocent and asked in return. He could feel that something was wrong from the guard's tone, especially the strange look in his eyes. It was as if he was looking at a pervert. The guard hurriedly waved his hand. "No, it's nothing. It's just that the business, there's a little special. You'll understand once you take a look. The staircase to the 3rd floor is behind the 2nd door on the left. I can't leave my post to lead the way for you. I'm really sorry. Finally, I wish you a good time tonight." After throwing down the last word, he rushed out of the hall at lightning speed and returned to his workstation. He stared straight ahead, his forehead sweating profusely. Chapter 570. Damn it, this guy's behavior is just too strange. I bet my head that there's something wrong with the third floor's business. Portia muttered to herself as she stared at the guard's nervous back. The corner of Andre's eyes twitched. He immediately turned his head and asked Jays in a low voice, "What kind of business is this third floor running? Why is the guard looking at us with that kind of expression?" He had a strong premonition that the third floor was prepared for people with special hobbies. Perhaps it was humans and beasts, or men and men. In short, it definitely had nothing to do with the word normal. Jays spread his hands innocently. Do you think that with my income level, I'm someone who can afford to spend money in this kind of place? Although I've always dreamed of having a chance to enjoy the wild of frenzy, unfortunately, I haven't had the chance so far. Well, it seems that I can only go and see for myself if I want to unravel the mystery. I hope my eyes won't go blind. Andre held his forehead with a helpless expression. He had originally intended to take advantage of the dazzling gold coins to inquire about some useful information, especially when Clarissa Bessemer had come, whether she often used this place as her hiding place, and so on. Through this, he could further determine her character and characteristics. However, the guard's intense reaction just now had ruined everything. Andre didn't know if this was part of Clarissa's protective measures, but he could feel that there were two eyes hidden in the shadows in the hall, watching his every move. Following the path pointed out by the guard, the group quickly passed through the dimly lit corridor filled with various nude oil paintings hanging on both sides. It was filled with a lascivious atmosphere. Just as they were about to push open the door and enter the last room on the third floor, they suddenly heard a low growl from inside. "Oh, great, great, treasure. That's it. Use the whip. Don't use the candle. I like the feeling of the whip on my body." The one who let out the almost perverted cry was a man. From a mixture of pain and pleasure, one could tell that he enjoyed the whole process very much and didn't feel that the pain was a kind of torture. "Uh-huh, you lowly male dog. You actually like the feeling of being whipped. Now kneel down and lick my toes. Otherwise, I'll stop whipping you." Another woman with a rough voice cursed loudly in the common language that she was not very familiar with. At the same time, she waved her whip in the air, making cracking sounds. When a man heard this, he immediately begged loudly, "No, no, no, don't stop. Look, I'm already kneeling down." What followed was a disgusting sucking sound. There was no need to ask what this guy was doing. Even Jesse, who had always been very receptive, couldn't help but frown. Portia pointed at the exquisitely carved door and asked in a low voice, "Are you sure this is the meeting place? You know, I don't want to see anything I shouldn't see, and I don't want to be mistaken as a pervert. Maybe it's just a cover-up. I don't think Clarissa would be so bored as to deliberately choose such a place to disgust us." Jesse's tone was very uncertain. Even he himself wondered if there was a problem. Among the three of them, the only one who could still remain calm was Andre. As a soul from the era of information explosion, he had long seen people with strange sexual fetishes. A mere sexual abuse was nothing to him. Of course, for Orier, whose thoughts and behavior were still at the level of the Dark Middle Ages, such behavior was still unacceptable for the time being. They even felt that this kind of person had a mental problem, and it was better to stay as far away as possible. "Forget it. It's better for me to wait outside. The two of you can go in." Portia quickly took 2 steps back and sat on the floor in the corner. Without hesitation, she expressed her firm stance. As a woman, she was more or less a little conservative in her thoughts. She couldn't stand such a scene, so she simply didn't want to see it. However, the remaining 2 men had no choice. After all, one of them was an intermediary, and the other had to talk to Clarissa face to face. Listening to the gasps and screams coming from inside the door, Andre's last bit of patience was exhausted. He gave Jesse a look and said, "Let's go. Instead of making baseless guesses here, why don't we go in and see what's going on inside? You have the same thoughts as me. I have to say that Clarissa's choice of meeting place today is a little strange. It's completely unlike her previous style. After saying that, Jesse, as the intermediary, took 2 steps forward and carefully pushed the door open with his right hand. Immediately, he saw a strange and horrifying scene. He saw a naked male dwarf, less than 2 meters tall, kneeling on the ground. Opposite him was an orc female who was more than 9 meters tall, wearing translucent underwear, and had 2 protruding fangs. The former's entire body was covered in bloody whip scars. At this moment, he was greedily licking the other's thick toes while moaning in pleasure. The latter waved her whip and rhythmically whipped the former's back. Judging from her distorted expression, she was also enjoying this game. Oh, damn it. I think my eyes have gone blind. Jesse looked at this scene with his mouth agape. His entire person was in a daze. Who is it? Who are you? What are you trying to do by barging in? The female orc immediately sat up from the chair and vigilantly held the whip tightly. The dwarf immediately realized this as well. He quickly jumped up and let out an ear-piercing shriek. Scram! Get out! Immediately! Immediately! Otherwise, I'll call someone to break your bones. But it was a pity that Andre wasn't intimidated by their stern warnings. He smiled playfully and said, "Let's end the show here. We're Clarissa Bessemer's guests. Get her to come out quickly. Oh, right, the password is Moonlight Dance. Fortunately, I haven't forgotten." I don't understand what you're talking about. Who is Clarissa Bessemer? The dwarf and the female orc looked at each other and then pretended that they did not know anything. But unfortunately, the surprise that flashed through his eyes had already exposed everything. You don't understand? Or are you unwilling to understand? Andre asked with a faint smile. He slowly pulled out the thin sword from his waist, raised it high, and said very slowly, "Clarissa Bessemer, I know you're in this room. Come take a closer look at this sword. I believe you must be very familiar with it. That's right, this is Neil Grant's personal sword, and its owner is the murderer of your father. Guess, since the sword is with me, what happened to its original owner? I believe with your intelligence, it won't be difficult to guess the answer, right?" Chapter 571. The biggest difference between a smart person and an idiot was that a smart person only needed to mention a few key words, and they would immediately understand the meaning of the entire sentence. On the other hand, an idiot was the exact opposite. Even if you explained the entire incident in detail, they might not even understand a single word in the end. Obviously, a person who was proficient in 12 languages was definitely not an idiot. Therefore, after Andre finished speaking, the sound of gears grinding could be heard from the wardrobe in the room. Following that, a woman wearing a white headscarf, a white veil, and a white robe walked out. She had a pair of charming red eyes that were as clear as rubies and filled with the light of wisdom. She gently waved her hand at the dwarf and the female orc. The two of them immediately placed one hand on their chest and bowed deeply. Then they picked up their clothes and put them on before leaving the room consciously. Dangerous and mysterious, especially that indescribable temperament. It was like a huge whirlpool that made people unknowingly fall into it. Clarissa Bessemer? Andre looked into the woman's eyes and asked tentatively. The woman smiled and walked with light steps to the front of the chair. She sat down in a pleasing posture, revealing 2 bare feet that looked white and delicate. Every toenail was smeared with purple oil paint. There were even 2 strings of pearls hanging from her ankles, setting off her charming and smooth calves. After sitting down, she rested her chin on her right hand and asked, "What do you think? Other than Clarissa Bessemer, can I be anyone else?" That's not necessarily true. Many times, our eyes, nose, and ears send some false information to deceive the brain. In addition to the misunderstanding caused by habitual thinking, it doesn't seem difficult for a person to completely disguise themselves as someone else. Tell me, how can I believe that you are Clarissa Bessemer? After all, a name is just a code. It's not a real name with mysterious power. Just like how you can be called Clarissa Bessemer, others can be called Clarissa Bessemer. Andre said as he pulled out a chair and sat opposite the woman. A faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he enjoyed this special conversation that could make his brain work at full speed. That's right. What you said makes sense. Clarissa Bessemer is just a name, a code. Anyone can use it. But didn't you bring my middleman here? Isn't he enough to prove that I'm Clarissa Bessemer herself? As she spoke, the woman pointed at Jess, who was still in a daze. At this moment, her eyes were full of smiles, as if she wanted to see how Andre would respond. Him? Andre turned his head and deliberately revealed a playful expression. Then, he suddenly burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. How interesting. You actually want someone who hasn't seen you take off your veil for years to prove herself. I'm very sorry, but I really don't think this is a good idea, and I don't think it's credible at all. Seeing that the problem was easily resolved once again, the woman immediately clapped her hands and praised, as expected of the person who played the underground guild and the ratmen in the palm of his hand. He really didn't disappoint me. In fact, I've just obtained a piece of information about you. Although the content isn't much, it's more exciting than most people's lives. Although I don't know how you killed Neil Grant, how you escaped the pursuit of Seawolf Kent, why you instigated the underground war in Valen City, and what kind of benefits you plan to gain from it, one thing is certain, and that is that you definitely have a meticulous plan. Do you know, after I finished reading this information a few minutes ago, I didn't even want to see you again. Because you're too dangerous and too crazy, I didn't want to involve myself in danger, so I took the initiative to hide. But I didn't think that the moment you appeared, I would suddenly realize that we're the same kind of people. I have to say, this discovery made me very excited. Ever since my father was killed, I haven't seen someone similar to me for a whole 20 years. You're smart, wise, decisive, calm, rational, and you also have the pursuit of knowledge and truth. Everything that I have and desire can be found in you. If it wasn't for the large age difference, I would even think that you're a brother of mine who is lost in the outside world. I'm very honored that my thoughts are exactly the same as yours. You have to know that someone with such outstanding intelligence, but who hasn't come into contact with any arcane knowledge, is even rarer than the giant dragons on the continent. I wonder if you can satisfy my curiosity. What exactly is the reason why you didn't choose to leave the Sardinia Islands? Hatred? Or some other motive? I don't think that with your intelligence, you can't find a way to kill Neil. Perhaps Andre had already estimated that Clarissa's intelligence was very high, but now that he'd seen it with his own eyes, he realized that his estimation was far from enough. Her intelligence had long since surpassed the limits of humans. If converted to numerical values, it should be between 19 and 20. He didn't know how this woman in front of him had been able to do this before she'd fused magic energy into her brain, nor did he know how much power she controlled. Most importantly, since she had the ability, why didn't she take revenge for her father who'd been killed? There was no doubt that the first reaction of any sane person who witnessed their flesh and blood being killed by an enemy would be revenge. Whether it was a child who just started to understand or an old man who was about to reach the end of his life, there was no exception. However, Clarissa's behavior was rather strange, especially when she mentioned Neil's name. There wasn't any hatred, disgust, or enmity at all, as if he was just a stranger who had nothing to do with her and not her father's murderer. The woman felt the scrutiny in Andre's eyes and smiled as she brushed away a few strands of hair in front of her eyes. She said in a nonchalant tone, "Kill him? Why would I do that? You don't understand what happened back then at all. At the end of the day, everything was caused by my father's greed. Neil Grant only wanted to protect what belonged to him. My father was the one who discovered the value of the manuscript and wanted to take it for himself. Furthermore, he killed him in a moment of desperation, so there's no hatred in my heart at all. Naturally, there's no need to talk about revenge, because it's meaningless. Furthermore, with your intelligence, you should understand that hatred can't bring us any benefits. Its essence is pain and torture. Anyone who's deeply involved in it will end up either going completely crazy or self-destructing." Chapter 572. After listening to the other party's remarks, a strange look flashed in Andre's eyes. Then he tapped his finger on the table gently. After a full minute, he said, This is the reason why you chose not to take revenge? In my opinion, it's just a lame excuse to avoid responsibility and obligation. Indeed, as you said, hatred is full of pain and torment, but you forgot that it can also stimulate all the potential in a person. As long as one can break free from the shackles of the mind, things like self-destruction will not happen at all. What's more, according to the information I received, you almost drowned in the roadside drainage ditch in order to save your father. But now you're saying that there's no hatred in your heart. Obviously, if this isn't a lie, then there are only two possibilities. First, you and Neil have reached some kind of agreement in private. Although I don't know the specific content, I can still guess that it must be related to that notebook. Second, you're not Clarissa Bessemer at all, but someone else who replaced her. Since it's an imposter, there's naturally no so-called hatred. In addition, you haven't taken off your veil in front of Jays in recent years, which increases my suspicion in this regard. Tell me, which of these two speculations hit the nail on the head? Jays, who was standing on the side, had an unconcealable shock on his face. At the same time, he muttered to himself in a trembling voice, "Oh God, you mean she's not Clarissa anymore?" So that's the case. No wonder I felt that her attitude suddenly became strange in recent years. Even the number of times we met became less and less. To some extent, he was the person who spent the longest time with Clarissa in this world and had the closest relationship with her. Therefore, when the fog covering the surface was blown away, he quickly woke up and began to recall the bits and pieces of the recent years. Finally, he came to an answer. The real Clarissa had been replaced by this unidentified woman a few years ago. Seeing Jace's agitated look, Andre smirked slightly. He stared at the woman's ruby-like eyes and comforted him without turning his head. "Relax, buddy. I've already said that this is just speculation. As for whether it's true or not, it's up to this beautiful lady to answer for us. I believe she has already prepared an explanation. Why don't you calm down and listen to it?" Under his strong coercion, the woman did not show the slightest bit of panic. She just smiled calmly and asked, "Just based on this, you can conclude that I'm a fake? And my closest business partner. Even though you were stupid before, I didn't get to play first. You were so stupid that you couldn't even recognize your own people. As everyone knew, humans were a fickle race, especially at every age. There would be different changes. Some scholars called it maturity, while others called it aging. I'm already in my early 30s. It's impossible for me to be like those impatient girls in their 20s who dream about their Prince Charming all day. I need a relatively peaceful and stable life. And in order to do all this, I have to stay away from disputes. Don't you think that keeping a distance from a notorious liar is the most appropriate thing to do? As for the views on hatred, unfortunately, the two of us are a little different. At least in my opinion. A wise person shouldn't be obsessed with hatred, and there's no need to waste time and energy on an old past. Well, let's end the discussion about personal matters here. I think you should have more important things today, such as the notes you obtained from Neil. As the last word came out from the mouth behind the white veil, the woman who exuded a mysterious aura put her right leg over her left leg and gently shook her fair bare feet and smooth calves. She looked full of confidence, as if she was not affected by the doubt of her identity at all. Jace's performance was just the opposite. He stood there in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. Perhaps the words just now stimulated him a little too much, or perhaps he had doubts about his life. In short, his mind was no longer in this room, and he didn't even care if Clarissa was real or fake. However, Andre didn't give up. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the calves that kept shaking. His brain was working at high speed, and he seriously considered every word she said and every action she made since they met. He didn't even let go of her gaze and expression, trying to find loopholes that he overlooked. He was very clear about how high the intelligence of the woman sitting in front of him was, and he also knew that in order to find loopholes in such an opponent, he had to grasp every detail. In fact, it didn't matter to Andre whether the woman in front of him was the real Clarissa or not. The reason why he didn't let go was to pry open the psychological defense of the other party and pave the way for the next conversation. After all, Johannes Richerner's manuscript was too sensitive. Before he completely subdued or overpower the other party. He didn't intend to take it out so easily. Otherwise, once the news was leaked, the whole thing would become very troublesome. What? Are you still confused about my identity? Sigh, you're really a suspicious person, but as the same kind of person, I can barely understand your thoughts. In order to show my sincerity, today, I'll let you see what I look like without my veil. With that said, the woman pulled off the white veil, revealing all parts of her body except her eyes. She had a sharp chin, a high nose bridge, slightly prominent cheekbones, and thick and sexy lips. All of these formed a very three-dimensional facial features. In terms of the general aesthetics of Oriar, she should be regarded as a beauty, especially the light of wisdom in her eyes, which added a bit of intellectual beauty out of thin air. However, Andre had never seen Clarissa before, so he couldn't tell whether she was real or fake. He immediately turned his head and stared at Jesse with a questioning gaze, waiting for him to give an answer. Seeing the woman's appearance, Jesse's emotions suddenly became complicated. He wanted to speak several times, but he didn't know what to say. After a long time, he nodded with emotion. Yes, it's this face. After so many years, there are no traces of time left. Maybe you're right. I'm a notorious liar who has brought you a lot of trouble. In order not to drag you down, it's better for us to draw a clear line between us as soon as possible. Today is the last time I appear as an intermediary. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Did you hear that? He admitted that I'm Clarissa Bessemer. Do you have any questions now? The woman blinked and asked with a smile. She didn't seem to care about the departure of her partner for many years. She didn't care about the other party's life or death at all. Under that beautiful face hid an emotionless, cold heart. Chapter 573. A psychologist once concluded that the higher a person's IQ was, the colder their personality would be. This was because, in their opinion, more than 90% of the people around them were idiots. They couldn't understand their thoughts at all. At the same time, they couldn't communicate with them in a real sense. Andre did not know if the woman sitting in front of him had a similar problem, but he could feel that she did not care about Jess at all. It was as if he was just a tool that could be discarded at any time after being used. She was no different from the high-ranking members of the Linton City Mage Association. In fact, the reason why most mages were reclusive, cruel, cold, and strange was due to a severe lack of communication. They spent their days locked in their mage towers or laboratories, studying the mysteries of magic day after day, gradually isolating themselves from the outside world. At most, they would occasionally come out to discuss problems with other mages and purchase some necessities. As one of the high-ranking members of the Linton City Mage Association, Andre had met a few old fellows who were rank 9 and above in private. Without exception, they were all complete egoists who did not care about the lives of ordinary people. The most extreme of them would even sell their own children as goods. Perhaps in their eyes, their lives had evolved to another level. It was as if they were gods looking down on mortals. Many people who exceeded a certain level of intelligence would unknowingly make similar mistakes. Although this woman was not a mage and had not mastered any powerful arcane spells, she had the common problem of many spellcasters: selfishness, conceit, and seeing the people around her as pawns. She did not miss any of these mistakes. Just as Andre was about to say something, he suddenly discovered a tattoo in the shape of a longsword where the pearls were on her ankle. It looked like the symbol of some organization or a symbol of some status. In order to make sure that he was not mistaken, he rushed out with lightning speed and grabbed the woman's foot. He pushed aside the pearls that were covering her ankle and saw a black longsword mark. Although it had dimmed due to time, he could still vaguely make out the delicate patterns on the blade. Bastard! You! What are you doing? Let me go! There's a pervert here! The woman panicked and struggled to break free. At the same time, she shouted at the door, as if she wanted the dwarf and female orc who had just left to come in and save her. But it was a pity that she didn't receive any response after shouting for a long time. After a full minute, Portia's languid voice sounded through the crack in the door. Stop shouting. Those two disgusting bastards have been knocked out by me. They can't help you now. In addition, I'll kindly remind you that it's best not to play any tricks in front of that guy. There's a crazy monster locked in his brain. Once it's released, the consequences will be unimaginable. Hearing the halfling's evaluation of himself, Andre had a faint smile on his face. He then said in a very firm tone, "She's right, Mississippi. You'd better cooperate, or I may take a lot of extreme measures. Also, I can basically confirm that you're not Clarissa Bessemer at all. The reason is simple. According to Clarissa's life experience, she must have suffered a lot when she was young and walked a lot of roads. The soles of her feet must have calluses or thick skin, but you are very delicate. You don't look like someone who has walked a lot. You are a disguise, a substitute, and a bait placed in the open. Tell me, who sent you here? What does this sword-shaped tattoo mean? Miss, you owe me a lot of answers. Fortunately, I've always been patient. I can sit down and listen to your explanation." As Andre successfully found a breakthrough, the conceit in the woman's eyes completely disappeared. Her spirit also entered a state of semi-collapse. Her whole body was constantly trembling. She crouched on the ground and curled up into a ball, as if this was the only way to make her feel a little safer. Obviously, she wasn't afraid of the people in the room, but something else, especially her 10 fingers. Because she used too much force, her nails were embedded in her flesh. She also let out a neurotic growl. No, I can't fail. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Please don't kill me. Kill you? Tell me, who wants to kill you? Andre was keenly aware of the information contained in these long-winded ramblings. He immediately bent down and asked loudly, Lance will kill me, just like how he rushed into my house and killed my parents. He's a devil through and through. The woman's spirit had obviously been seriously stimulated. The more she spoke, the more agitated she became. In the end, she even pounced on him and scratched like a madwoman. She had completely lost all rationality. Seeing that they couldn't communicate normally now, Andre sighed helplessly. He raised his hand and hit the back of the woman's neck hard. The woman who was crazy a second ago instantly lost consciousness and fell softly in his arms. Traces of tears could even be seen at the corner of her eyes. Oh my God, things have changed too quickly. I don't even know what expression I should use now. Clarissa had actually been impersonated. Why? The most important thing is, where is she now? Jess grabbed his hair hard and asked a series of questions hysterically. At this moment, his heart was collapsing. As a successful liar, he was unknowingly deceived for several years without knowing it. Just thinking about it was ironic. Andre carefully checked every inch of the woman's body while answering in a flat tone. The real Clarissa may be dead or imprisoned somewhere, but I personally prefer the former. After all, the dead can keep secrets better. As for why, of course, it is for a notebook, a priceless notebook. As soon as he finished speaking, he took out a 2-foot-long thin steel wire from his thin underwear. The steel wire was densely packed with chilling sawteeth. It could be used to kill people by strangling their throats, and it could also cut through most iron shackles. Staring at this exquisite weapon, Andre's lips curled up slightly. He said to himself, "Interesting. I dare to bet that there are only a few people in the whole continent who can make this. It seems that the other party has a strong background. I have to be careful." Chapter 574. As we all know, the wire saw was a kind of high-strength stretching wire as the raw material. By winding a few or even dozens of small threads into a sawtooth shape, it could achieve the purpose of cutting objects. Perhaps to Earth, which had entered the information age, it was just an ordinary camping tool. But to the Oleal continent, which had no industrial foundation at all, it was an out-and-out treasure. Not to mention how the clumsy human fingers could wrap around it. Just pulling on the tensile steel wire, which was almost invisible to the naked eye, was enough to render more than 99% of blacksmiths helpless. Andre could almost imagine how powerful an organization was to be able to equip a bait with such luxurious equipment, to be able to make its members lose their minds out of fear. Although the contents of the notes had not been deciphered, he had almost confirmed that this was definitely the manuscript left by the master of swordsmanship, Johnny Richard Turner. Otherwise, who would spend so much manpower, material resources, and patience for a crappy poetry collection? What? What should we do next? Jess stared at the steel saw that was emitting a cold light and asked at a loss. As a liar, a big liar who had successfully deceived countless people, even if he was stupid, he knew what it meant for this thing to appear on a weak woman. He felt bad. First, he was inexplicably hypnotized and controlled, followed by being blacklisted by the Underground Guild, and now he was involved in a very dangerous incident. Sometimes he even wondered if he was cursed by the goddess of misfortune. Otherwise, how could he encounter so many coincidences and not even have a chance to escape? Next, Andre's face showed a strange expression, and then he shook his head without hesitation. I'm sorry, you have no next, my dear friend. Do you still remember what I said before? You will prove your value, but unfortunately, not only did you not prove it, but you also released a lot of wrong information, causing me a lot of trouble. But I'm a kind person, and I don't intend to kill you, so you can leave at any time. Oh, yes, remember to keep your mouth shut. If you dare to tell others what happened today, then I will soon appear again. I'm sure you don't want to see that day, right? Although the entire sentence didn't contain any insulting words, nor did it contain any bloody threats, Jess still felt a bone-piercing chill. He knew that once he walked out of the frenzied wilderness alone, it wouldn't be long before he became someone's prisoner. Whether it was the Underground Guild leader who was in a state of rage, or the organization behind this woman, they would never let him go. Trash has no value in existing. You have no right to live. This was a principle that every citizen of Valence City understood. Even the children of a few years old were no exception. As someone who had lived in the City of Sin for decades, Jess had seen with his own eyes how miserable the fate of those who had lost their value, but he never thought that he would have such a day. He didn't want to die. At least, he didn't want to be tortured and leave this world. Just as Jess was racking his brains trying to convince and to let him stay, Portia, who had been waiting outside the door, quietly slipped in. She first glanced at the unconscious woman, then glanced at the sweating swindler, a playful smile on her lips. She then asked Andre, "How is it? Did you find anything?" No, she was too agitated just now and couldn't communicate normally. But I found this in the tattoo on her ankle. Andre raised the delicate wire saw as he spoke, at the same time pointing at the sword-shaped tattoo with his other hand. Wow, what a beautiful little toy. Quick, let me see. From the moment she saw the wire saw, Valen's eyes released two terrifying rays of light. She immediately rushed up and snatched it, carefully inspecting every detail on it. She even unknowingly drooled. Without a doubt, her halfling and thief nature had once again flared up. She didn't need to ask to know that she wouldn't be able to get the wire saw back. Andre had a premonition that something like this would happen, so he sighed helplessly and reminded her, "All right, that's just a tool. You should first check this tattoo and see if you've seen it before. After all, we don't know anything about the organization behind this woman, so even the slightest clue would be good." Valen reluctantly moved her gaze away from the wire saw and then gently shrugged her shoulders. "No problem. You're the leader. I'll listen to you. But I'll have to keep this tool for 2 days to study." Although she tried her best to look serious, Andre knew that he wouldn't be able to get the wire saw back. "I have to say, you're really a qualified thief. As long as you see something you like, you'll immediately think of ways to take it for yourself. All right, it's yours." Andre generously gave up the ownership of the spoils of war. Of course, more importantly, he really didn't know how to make a halfling obediently hand over her beloved item. "Hee, thank you. I owe you one more time." Seeing that her scheme had succeeded, Valen winked playfully. As the saying goes, when you have too many lice, you don't feel itchy, and when you have too many debts, you don't have to worry. She had already agreed to serve Andre anyway, so she didn't mind prolonging her time a little. After carefully putting the wire saw into her waist pouch, she took out a magnifying glass and squatted down to carefully examine the slightly blurred longsword tattoo. After about 3 minutes, she said, Judging from the degree of fading, this tattoo should have been made at least 10 to 15 years ago. Moreover, it wasn't made with a needle, but with a red-hot, needle-shaped soldering iron. I found some burnt dead skin, similar to those found in the slave market. Last but not least, this woman's body has been forcibly altered. Many of her bones have been twisted and deformed. If I'm not wrong, she must have been carrying all kinds of shackles and molds when she was a child, so that she would look exactly like Clarissa Bessemer. You're saying she was trained as Clarissa Bessemer's substitute 10 years ago, and then sent to Valence City to carry out a mission? Andre narrowed his eyes and asked with a serious expression. Chapter 575. Based on the information obtained from Kent, it seemed that Neil had finished deciphering the notebook around this time. This meant that the mysterious organization had started their preparations after receiving the information, patiently waiting for more than a decade before making their move. Such terrifying perseverance and willpower was enough to make anyone shudder. Portia clearly understood the severity of the situation. She put away her usual cheeky smile and replied with a frown, "More or less, but I still need to check her face to be sure. Hurry, we don't have much time. We need to leave before they discover the situation here. Otherwise, we won't have much chance of winning in a direct confrontation." As a smart person, Andre would never take the initiative to attack without knowing the details of the enemy. He wouldn't be so foolish as to fight force with force when his side was clearly at a disadvantage, especially when the mage profession was still sealed. His personal strength had been severely reduced, so he couldn't let his guard down. "Don't worry, I'll give you a satisfactory answer in 5 minutes." After saying that, Portia took out a few strange tools from her waist pouch and started fiddling with the unconscious woman's face. She measured the distance between the eyebrows, cheeks, cheekbones, and jaw. By collecting these data, she could find the external influences during the development of the bones. If the deformation was too great, the overall structure would be very strange. One had to know that in Auraire, other than magic that could change a person's appearance, they could also wear various molds when they were young to cultivate a specific appearance and height. In this regard, the slave merchants had the most right to speak. They often bought some young children and forced them to wear molds. Every once in a while, they would replace them with a bigger mold according to their growth. In this way, as they grew up, these children would become more and more beautiful, and they would be sold for a higher price. Of course, it was theoretically impossible to completely replicate a person's face, figure, and physical characteristics. This was because people were constantly growing, aging, and eventually dying. Unless someone could continuously create molds according to the target's growth and changes. However, this was too troublesome. It was better to just use magic to save the trouble. The only downside was that magic could be broken, and people who grew up with molds would grow naturally. If one didn't examine carefully, they wouldn't be able to find any flaws. While the big-breasted lowly was busy, Andre turned his gaze back to the uneasy jays. He asked, "What, you haven't left yet? Or do you think you can convince me? I beg you, please give me another chance. I will definitely prove my worth. I know a lot of secrets about the smugglers, and at the same time, I can contact the ships that go to the neighboring cities." Jesse knew that this was likely to be his last chance. He tried his best to show his useful side, and even took out the secret that he had hidden in his heart for many years in exchange. But unfortunately, he didn't notice the depth and wisdom in Andre's eyes, as well as the faint smile on his lips after a full 10 minutes. Jesse finally said everything that he could think of in one breath. He couldn't think of any other use for himself. Like a criminal waiting for the judge to sentence him, his eyebrows were filled with tension. "Are you done? Since you're done, please turn around and leave. As for the reason, I've already said it once, and I don't want to repeat it a second time. But seeing how sincere you are, I can give you a chance, a trial. Work hard to prove yourself. If your performance meets expectations, I will accept you as one of us. Remember, you only have one chance. I will be watching your every move in the dark." After blurting out the last word, Andre didn't reveal any more details. He stood quietly on the spot, waiting for the results of Portia's examination. He didn't even reveal the content of the trial. Everything depended on Jesse to use his brain to analyze and speculate. The difficulty was beyond imagination. Although Jesse didn't understand what he needed to do, he still forced himself to look thoughtful and nodded. Then, with a stomach full of questions, he slowly turned around and left the room, disappearing at the end of the corridor. Just as his footsteps gradually faded into the distance, Portia asked without turning her head, "You intend to use him as bait?" Andre nodded lightly. "That's right. I believe that this mysterious organization will definitely take action before the Underground Guild. As long as we follow the vine to the melon, we will definitely find some clues. Besides, this can also test whether Jesse is worthy of my nurturing. Killing two birds with one stone, isn't it? Nurture him? A liar? Are you crazy?" Portia stood up in shock, her face full of disbelief. "Why not? You have to know that experienced liars are a scarce resource. They can become outstanding diplomats or competent negotiators. Isn't that worth nurturing?" Andre asked with a smile. As a person with rich experience, he knew that there were no useless people in the world. The reason why he was temporarily useless was because he hadn't found a suitable position for himself, especially someone like Jesse who had been in the gray area for many years. As long as he was used well, he could often play an unimaginable role. Portia obviously couldn't find any reason to refute. She could only spread out her hands and say, "All right, I admit that what you said makes sense. It seems that being a liar isn't a bad profession. Why didn't I realize that it had such a bright future before? Ha ha. Thieves have a bright future too. At least they aren't worse than liars. All right, let's stop chatting. Now tell me about the results of your examination. Is she the kind of person who grew up with molds?" After making a simple joke, Andre quickly shifted the topic to the main topic. He needed to deal with the matter at hand as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he might not be able to catch up with Jesse. Portia, who had always been straightforward, pressed a hand on the woman's forehead and explained in a low voice, "Pay attention to the uneven skull here. It's obviously caused by changing the mask many times. Someone put on a mask to correct the shape of her face when she was very young and changed it every once in a while. That's why there are traces of bone deformation on her forehead. In addition, the traces of her chin being corrected by the mold are also very obvious. Apart from the color of her eyes, even her hair is washed out with a kind of medicine over a long period of time. That means the other party is really scheming. Let's see who will have a last laugh. I'll give you a mission now. Follow behind Jesse and don't act rashly no matter what happens. Inform me immediately after you find out where he's hiding." Andre instructed with a cold smile. Chapter 576. As a thief, Bordia was best at stealth and tracking, so she gladly nodded and agreed. "No problem. It's a simple task, but I like it. But are you sure you don't need to help that liar at a critical moment? I'm not sure if he'll be able to withstand the interrogation." "No, there's no need. This is also part of the test. I don't like people who change their minds. If he can't withstand it, then he's not qualified to be my training target. All right, go quickly. He'll disappear from our sight in a while. Also, be careful. Don't get too close. Come back after you confirm his location." Andre was never a soft-hearted person. His sympathy was usually reserved for children, pregnant women, and the elderly. He didn't care whether Jays was tortured physically, as long as he didn't die. As for the handicap, with the powerful healing ability of this world's divine spells, even the dead could be resurrected, not to mention a mere cripple, although the cost was a little high. Bordia patted her voluptuous chest and promised with a smile. "Heh, don't worry, I'm very confident in my stealth ability. I won't be discovered. Last question, how do you plan to deal with this woman, the dwarf, and the female orc outside?" Staring at the woman's tear-stained face, Andre pondered for a few seconds. This woman should know a lot of useful information. Let's keep her for now. I'll bring her back to the basement of the warehouse and slowly interrogate her. The two outside are just pawns. They probably don't know anything. Just get rid of them. There's no need to take the bodies away. Just leave them here as a warning. In a short moment, he made a judgment on the fate of 3 people. One could live for the time being, while the other 2 would be killed immediately. There wasn't any sloppiness in the process. It was so decisive that it made one's heart palpitate. This was not like killing someone in a battle. In a battle, people were controlled by their survival instincts. Often, people did not have much time to think. Their bodies reacted naturally, and by the time their brains began to think about what killing meant, the other party had already fallen into a pool of blood. With ample time, there were generally only 2 kinds of people who could kill without any psychological barriers. One was the superiors. In order to protect their rights and status, they would not hesitate to kill even their own flesh and blood. The other was the extremely selfish bastards. They did not care about their own kind at all. In order to obtain rich benefits, they would even carry out an inhumane bloodbath in a city. It was apparent that Andre didn't belong to the above 2 types of people. His motive for killing was to protect himself. It was a rational judgment of his brain. In fact, if he could, he would find a place to lock them up temporarily. But it was a pity that now wasn't the time to be soft-hearted. Portia keenly captured the annoyance in his eyes. She tiptoed and asked softly, "How about I go out and help you get rid of those 2 little troublemakers?" Because they were so close, Andre could almost feel the breath of the big-breasted lowly, as well as the bottomless cleavage of her chest. He held her chin with one hand and looked into her lively eyes. He shook his head slightly and said, "Thank you, but there's no need for that. I'm not so weak that I can't even carry out the decision I made. As long as humans are alive, they have to make all kinds of choices. Some things are joyful, some are painful and helpless. But there is one thing that we can't run away from. Running away is a terrible poison. Once it becomes a habit, you will become a coward. No matter what you encounter, you will always think of running away to solve the problem. Although I hate unnecessary killing, I hate the consequences of running away even more. So, it's better to do it myself. Finally, thank you again for your relationship. In return, I have a small gift for you." After saying that, he suddenly bent down and kissed the soft lips of the halfling girl. Portia was stunned. Her mind went blank, but her biological instincts made her start to respond clumsily. Her 2 short arms subconsciously wrapped around his neck, and her breathing suddenly became hurried. She was like a greedy child, demanding to her heart's content. Only after a full minute did she reluctantly separate. "Hee, your reaction is really intense. Don't tell me this is your first time kissing?" Looking at the blushing face of the big-breasted lowly, as well as the lust in her eyes, Andre smiled and teased her. "Damn it, you bastard. How dare you sneak attack me?" Portia obviously did not want to admit that she was a rookie kissing for the first time. So, she flew into a rage out of humiliation and started to attack with her small fists. But she did not realize that this kind of attack was more symbolic than practical. It was more like the flirting between lovers. Moreover, with her petite body, she was completely unable to cause any damage. She was easily caught and held in his arms. Feeling the intense heartbeat of the halfling girl, Andre gently kissed her forehead and said in a calm voice, "Go and complete your mission. Remember to be careful. I don't want to see you hurt. After you're done, immediately return to the warehouse. We'll discuss the next step." "Oomph. You don't have to worry. I can take care of myself." Portia pouted and squirmed out of his arms. She made a face and quickly disappeared at the end of the dim corridor. After watching her leave completely, Andre took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "I'm going to start working now. I hope that the guard will not make things too difficult for me on account of the gold coins. Otherwise, it would be really difficult to transport a living person out. In order to ensure that he did not attract anyone's attention, Andre quickly stripped the unknown woman naked, even her underwear and petticoats. He then opened the wardrobe in the room and chose the sexiest gauze dress to put on. He then covered her eyes with a butterfly-shaped mask and finally put on a pair of exquisite high-heeled wooden shoes. In just a few minutes, An image that was originally full of intelligence had been transformed into the appearance of most high-class prostitutes in the frenzied wilderness. If one ignored the fact that she was unconscious, there was almost no flaw in her disguise. But Andre still felt that it was not enough. He opened a bottle of wine and poured a mouthful in her mouth and sprinkled a little on her clothes, pretending that she was drunk. After completing all the preparations, he helped the woman up and walked downstairs. As they passed through the corridor, he casually stabbed the dwarf and the female orc in the heart, completely eliminating the last threat. Chapter 577. Perhaps due to the lack of customers on the third floor, coupled with the strong perfume smell in the air, the faint smell of blood in the corridor didn't attract anyone's attention. Even the attendants who passed by occasionally thought that the customers were having fun and didn't notice the two corpses lying in the dark corner. Just like that, Andre carefully supported the disguised woman all the way to the hall. But before he could approach the door, a fully armed guard suddenly blocked his way. "I'm very sorry, sir. The frenzied wilderness has a rule. Without permission, you can't take away any of the ladies here." "Rules? Why didn't I know about this rule? And this lady beside me isn't one of your people. She's a friend of mine. Please step aside, or I'll get angry." Andre pretended to be angry and glared at the guard. In fact, he wasn't too sure if this woman disguised as Clarissa Bessemer had anything to do with the frenzied wilderness. But now, he could only use a tough attitude to force the other party to back down. But the guard obviously didn't buy it. He continued to block the way and threatened in a low voice, "Sir, please don't treat me like an idiot. Look around you. Which man who comes to the frenzied wilderness for fun would bring a female companion? Let her go right now, or don't blame me for being rude." At this point, he placed one hand on the hilt of his sword and raised his other hand to wave. The other guards saw this and rushed over to surround them. Andre couldn't help but frown when he saw that the situation was heading in the worst possible direction. Even though these guys who weren't even level 1 warriors wouldn't pose any threat to him, he still had a burden on him and couldn't make use of his advantage in speed. Of course, the most important thing was that the location of the hall was too conspicuous. There were many thugs from the underground guilds patrolling the streets. If things got out of hand, it wouldn't be easy to escape. After all, he was still on the other party's wanted list. As the guards approached, Andre had no choice but to retreat. Just as his last bit of patience was about to be worn out, a sudden exclamation came from the door. "Oh my God, aren't you that generous customer from before? What's going on? Why are you all surrounding him?" He saw a man in the same armor running towards him. He was none other than the guy who had helped Andre buy the mask half an hour ago. "Are you sure he's a guest and not a swindler?" Seeing that it was his colleague, another guard immediately asked. The reason why he cooperated with his other companions to stop Andre was mainly because he felt that the other party's behavior was suspicious. In addition, the woman beside him was also swaying, looking very much like she was drugged. The man who had just rushed over replied without hesitation, "Yes, I dare to use my 1 year's salary to guarantee that he is definitely not a swindler." Perhaps because of the assurance, the guards immediately relaxed a lot. Only the person who stood out first had a strange look in his eyes. Then he nodded gently and said, "Well, maybe I'm too nervous. But to be on the safe side, I have to take off this lady's mask to make sure that she's not one of our employees." "Take off the mask? Why should I agree to your unreasonable request? Don't you require every guest to wear a mask? Did you change it now?" Andre mocked the other party with an overbearing attitude. His purpose was to match his age, and, on the other hand, he found that the other party seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for him. Without a doubt, being rejected and ridiculed in person was a very embarrassing thing. The guard, who looked to be in his 40s, suddenly turned red. His fists were clenched tightly, and his eyes shot out two murderous glints as if he wanted to swallow Andre alive. But it was a pity that this kind of child's play couldn't scare Andre at all. Not only did he not show any fear, he even sneered and stretched out his hand to slap the other party's cheek. "Who do you think you are? He was just a lowly person. Just now, you actually dared to block my way. If it wasn't for someone who stood up and spoke, do you think you would still be alive now? Idiot. Put away this trick of scaring ordinary people. Who do you think you are? Who can come here to spend money? To put it bluntly, any random guest had the ability to make your entire family die in one night. Let me give you one last piece of advice. Don't be too confident in your skills. If your sword was more than an inch out of its sheath, then you would be a corpse lying on the floor now. As the last word came out from Andre's mouth, his other hand suddenly pulled out a thin sword at an extremely fast speed. The surrounding people only saw a flash of cold light in front of their eyes, and then they were surprised to find that there was a bloody wound on the neck of the guard standing in front of him. It was just enough to cut through the oily skin, and scarlet blood slowly flowed down the wound. It was a very eye-catching sight. No one in this world was an idiot. Those who knew a little about fighting understood what this sword meant. That was a speed and technique that only a true close combat profession could achieve. In other words, it wasn't too difficult for someone who could do this to kill a few guards. Cold, calm down. Please calm down. No matter what, don't be rash. The guy who had just used a year's salary to vouch for Andre hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over. He was very clear that his colleague's request had indeed crossed the line. It was very likely that he saw that the other party was young and unfamiliar, so he wanted to make things difficult for him and extort some money while he was at it. One had to know that many guards would use similar methods in secret, but he hadn't expected to kick a steel plate this time. Don't worry, I'm very calm. I don't plan on killing this idiot, but he better behave himself in the future. If there's a second time, Andre purposely didn't finish his sentence, only leaving behind a chilling gaze. He then helped the unconscious woman out of the front door. No one dared to stop him, and no guard dared to make such a ridiculous request like taking off his mask. In Valence City, if you had a large amount of money and powerful personal strength, you could have almost everything. It was very clear that Andre's current performance had left a very strong impression on everyone, temporarily intimidating everyone around him. Otherwise, once they started fighting, the guard would quickly realize that he wasn't as strong as they thought. Chapter 578. Just as Andre successfully brought the unknown woman out of the frenzied wilderness, the renowned swindler Jace finally met with an enormous crisis a few streets away. Ever since he'd walked out of the upper city district with a stomach full of questions, he'd carefully avoided the patrolling thugs sent out by the underground guilds. He'd planned to return to his residence to pack his belongings, then find a secluded place to lie low for a while. But he'd never imagined that he'd be stopped in a remote alley by a masked man wielding a sharp blade before he could even put this idea into action. "Who are you? What do you want?" Jace asked loudly with a stern expression. As someone who'd lived in Valence City for more than 10 years, he was very clear that the other party wasn't a hooligan who robbed people on the streets, nor was he a gang member who specialized in kidnapping and extortion. He was a true expert who killed without batting an eyelid. Especially those two blue-gray eyes. There wasn't a trace of emotion in them from beginning to end, causing one's heart to tremble with fear. "Jace Parrott, please come with me. We have some questions for you to answer. Remember, don't try to resist or escape, because I'm someone who hates trouble. If you make me feel troubled, then it's very likely that something painful will happen next. I'm sure you don't want to taste pain either, right?" The masked man threatened in a monotonous voice. Even though he hadn't made any offensive moves, Jace's forehead was covered in sweat within a short few seconds. He more or less knew the other party's background, but in order to stall for time, he pretended to be ignorant and continued to ask, "Go? Where to? And who are you?" The masked man clearly hated people who kept asking questions and immediately frowned. "You ask too many questions. If I think it's necessary to let you know, I'll naturally tell you. But if you dare open your mouth to ask another word, I don't mind cutting off half of your tongue." Perhaps the threat was effective, or perhaps Jace didn't want to anger the other party, but he immediately shut his mouth after saying this and didn't make another sound. After all, everyone only had one tongue. If half of it was cut off, it would be difficult for him to even speak. As a swindler, how could he deceive others if he couldn't even speak properly? For the sake of his career, Jace decided to be more honest. At the very least, he couldn't anger the other party, or he'd be the unlucky one. Very good. Very good. Looks like you're a smart person and a sensible person. Don't worry. As long as you answer our questions obediently, we won't make things too difficult for you, let alone kill you. The masked man seemed very satisfied with Jace's performance. He immediately took out a black cloth from his pocket and covered Jace's eyes tightly. Then, he aimed at the back of Jace's head and smashed it hard. Bang! Following a dull thud, poor Jace fell to the ground without knowing what had happened, a large bump on the back of his head. He'd originally planned to use his familiarity with the streets and alleys of Valen City to memorize the location of the other party's base, but unfortunately, the other party didn't intend to give him this opportunity. Staring at the stunned face on the ground, the masked man sneered and muttered to himself, "Humph, idiot, do you really think you can survive after being targeted by us?" The Blackblade's principle of doing things has always been absolute secrecy. Either you become one of us, or you become a lifeless corpse. After saying this, he picked up Jace and ran towards the sparsely populated outskirts. Due to being built on an island, Valen City didn't have tall city walls. In less than half an hour, they'd left the city and arrived at the entrance of a cave covered in dense vines. The masked man didn't enter immediately, but instead rolled up his sleeves to reveal the longsword tattoo on his arm, as if waiting for the person inside to walk out. Soon, a minute had passed. The cave was completely silent. There wasn't even the sound of insects, let alone a person. However, the masked man didn't seem to mind at all. He stood in place without moving, seemingly very patient as he allowed the salty sea breeze to blow against his face. After a full 10 minutes, a man's low and raspy voice sounded from within the cave. "What took you so long to come back? How's the situation? Have you found the missing manuscript?" The masked man immediately knelt on one knee without another word and replied respectfully, "I'm very sorry, sir. I'm afraid there's been an accident. This fellow came out on his own, and the people with him seem to have sensed something. Moreover, we've lost contact with Wooden Puppet. Do you think we should take some countermeasures?" "Oh, Wooden Puppet has lost contact? If I remember correctly, this is the first time she's lost contact after so many years of carrying out missions, right?" The man with the raspy voice was clearly very surprised. "That's right, sir. This is indeed the first time she's lost contact. That's why I've hurried back to ask for your instructions. Wooden Puppet knows too much. Once her mouth is pried open, then the entire plan may be exposed. Once she hides herself, it won't be so easy for us to find the lost manuscript. I personally feel that we should mobilize all of our forces to take back the manuscript and completely wipe out anyone related to this matter." Feeling the naked, killing intent of the masked man, the man who had been hiding in the cave from beginning to end fell silent. After a long while, he spoke again. "No, let's not act rashly. The mission of the Black Blade is to collect the lost manuscripts of the master swordsman, Johnny Richard Turner, from all over the world and organize them. Chapter 579. A few minutes later, a series of hair-raising screams came from the cave. Although Borsha, who had been hiding in the treetops, didn't know what was going on, she couldn't help but feel sad for the man. After all, for a man to make such a sound, he must be in a rather miserable situation. But she didn't forget Andre's warning and didn't intend to take the risk to enter the cave. That was because the aura emitted by the old man was too terrifying. She was sure that if she approached within 30 meters of him, she would be discovered in an instant. Even stealth would be useless. Warriors, especially high-level warriors, they were often especially sensitive to changes in their surroundings, such as sounds, smells, and temperature. Coupled with the sixth sense that had been trained from countless brushes with death, an ordinary thief might expose their position if they got a little closer, let alone launching a sneak attack from the back. Without a doubt, the old man was an extremely fearsome warrior. This could be seen from the thickness of his arms. Only those who wielded heavy weapons for a long period of time would have their muscles become abnormally developed. There was a unique name for it among the warrior's specialties: ape arms. This was a powerful strength that required talent and rigorous training over a long period of time. It allowed a warrior's arms to wield heavier weapons. To give a simple example, if a warrior wanted to wield a two-handed greatsword, he would have to use both hands to hold the hilt of the sword. However, if he had the ape arm specialty, he would only need to use one hand. The other hand could be used to wield other weapons or shields. The destructive power of a two-handed weapon and a one-handed weapon couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. The former was a huge threat to the enemy just by relying on its weight, while the latter could be easily blocked or parried. Therefore, this was a very powerful specialization that could greatly increase one's combat power. Warriors who had it generally wouldn't have a low profession level. As a thief who walked the nimble path, Portia was very clear that she had no chance of winning against such an enemy. After silently praying for Jess, she bent her waist and slowly retreated. Only after confirming that she was completely out of the opponent's range of perception did she turn and run back into the city. At the same time, Andre finally returned to his temporary lodging safe and sound. As a large-scale battle had occurred not long ago, all the spies in the alley had disappeared. Perhaps they had all died, or perhaps they had returned to report. In short, their disappearance saved him a lot of trouble. Lord of the Raging Flames, you're finally back. My brother and I were worried to death. Just now, there were sounds of fighting everywhere outside. I thought something had happened to you. Where is Portia? Why didn't she come back with you? And who is this woman? As soon as they crossed the threshold of the old warehouse, Fiona immediately greeted them with questions. From the frightened expression on her face, it could be seen that she was very nervous. One of her hands was clenching the hammer, and the other was holding the flintlock. Of course, Mabel wasn't any better. Not only was she holding a weapon in her hand, but she was also wearing a suit of armor. Her eyes were filled with vigilance, as if she would immediately attack anyone who broke through the door. Looking at the brother and sister's expressions, as if they were facing a formidable enemy, Andre's tensed nerves immediately relaxed. He shook his head with a smile and explained, "Relax, there's no enemy behind me. Besides, you've asked too many questions, so I have to answer them one by one. First of all, you don't have to pay attention to the fighting outside. I deliberately provoked it. I believe that from now on, there won't be any annoying flies around. Second, Portia is carrying out a mission outside, so she shouldn't be in any danger. I believe that she will be back soon, so you don't have to worry about her. Finally, this woman is a member of a mysterious organization. I need to get some information from her, so I brought her back. Now, help her to the bed in the basement and tie her up. Inform me when she wakes up." Oh my God, you've only been out for a few hours, and you've actually done so many sensational things? Mabel's mouth was wide open, her face full of disbelief. Although she vaguely knew that the two certainly didn't go out for a simple stroll, this was a bit too shocking. Sensational? Andre looked at the young man with a faint smile, and then deliberately replied in a relaxed and cheerful tone, "No, my dear friend, I haven't said the most sensational thing yet. You know, Portia and I launched a bloody massacre on the smugglers and swindlers of the Hiccup Dragon Tavern. Almost no one was left alive. The entire underground guild was alarmed, and now they're probably searching for our traces on the streets." After listening to this description, Fiona finally couldn't help but cover her face and let out a wail. "Oh, no, you're crazy. The great Acer Desir, what kind of voter have you chosen?" Since the tragedy on Turtle Island, she always felt that the nerve center of her brain was strong enough, and nothing could make her lose her composure. But unfortunately, the girl was still too naive. She had only settled down for 2 days, and she was immediately involved in dangerous and troublesome events again. She was showing signs of collapse. Glancing at her sister's desperate eyes, Mabel smiled bitterly and raised her head to ask Andre, "Is there anything else? If there is, just say it in one breath. Anyway, I'm numb now. To be honest, you're the most terrible and troublesome person I've ever seen." But fortunately, no matter how bad the situation is, you always have a way to deal with it. Ha! Thank you for your praise. That's all the sensational things for now. In addition, as a warrior, I think you'd better open your mind. No matter what difficulties or dangers you encounter, you can't be timid because the essence of a warrior is courage. Only by ensuring this can you become stronger and stronger. After saying that, Andre patted Fiona's shoulder hard to encourage her. Courage? Well, I'll try my best to be brave. Mabel nodded, and then supported the woman who showed no signs of waking up to walk to the basement. After watching the young man walk down the stairs, Andre casually found a chair and sat down, silently waiting for the halfling's return. Although it was close to midnight, he was not sleepy at all. What happened tonight was too fast and too sudden. There were many details that needed to be sorted out again to see if there were any overlooked parts. Chapter 580. It's already so late. What are you doing instead of sleeping? Noticing that Andre was sitting alone at the table, writing and drawing nonstop, the originally dejected Fiona immediately felt a strong sense of curiosity and took the initiative to ask. For someone like her who couldn't read, writing was a very sacred thing, especially when the letters were arranged in a special way to form words and sentences with various meanings. It was as interesting as magic. Of course, the above was merely the yearning and longing of a country girl for knowledge. In reality, of all the languages in Orire, the surface language was the easiest to learn. Moreover, it didn't have much of a historical background and had been spread along with the rise and expansion of the human race. The basic form of expression was simple and easy to understand spoken language. Nothing much, just a simple list of relationships to give me a more intuitive impression of recent events. Andre answered as he used a line to connect the names on the parchment. He then wrote down the relationship between the two next to the lines. This way, there would be a connection between the names. At a glance, it looked like a dense spiderweb. As a soul from an era of information explosion, he knew better than most people in this world how to use more scientific and efficient methods to analyze problems. A network of relationships was precisely what he needed most at the moment. One had to know that Orire was a society of relationships through and through. There were complicated relationships between nobles that couldn't be cut off, and there were also many grudges between organizations. Even the high and mighty gods were divided into factions according to their own ideals. They fought, resisted, and cooperated with each other. Although Valen City had always been known for its disorder and chaos, the relationships between all the organizations with interests were very clear. For example, the smugglers, the underground guilds, and the pirate alliance were a classic example of mutual benefit and interdependence. The Ratmen were the complete opposite. They essentially threatened the ruling position of the underground guilds, so they were constantly being suppressed. What Andre wanted to do was to think of a series of schemes and instigation to quickly intensify the conflicts hidden under the peaceful surface. This way, the underground guilds wouldn't have the energy to worry about anything else. This way, he would be able to concentrate the power of the shadow web to topple the pirate alliance, and then turn around to eradicate the malignant tumor in Valen City. However, this plan now had to include a mysterious organization hidden in the shadows. Although the other party's goal was only to steal the personal letter of the master swordsman, Johannes Richard Turner, and didn't show any signs of aggression, an organization that could carry out a plan for more than 10 years was a huge threat and variable no matter how one looked at it. Andre hated situations that were out of his control, so he wanted to test the reaction of this mysterious organization before launching his plan. As he considered the problem more and more, he gradually forgot about the passage of time. His eyes were fixed on the relationship diagram he had just drawn, and he was thinking about what to do next. Suddenly, light footsteps came from the roof, and not long after, a petite figure slid down the pillar. The whole process was as practiced as if she had just returned home. Fiona, who hadn't closed her eyes since the beginning, rushed over and hugged the other party in her arms. She greeted her with a smile. "Oh my God, Bosha, you're finally back. I was almost worried to death. How was it? Did things go smoothly? Did you get hurt?" The halfling thief took off his hood and shrugged helplessly. "I couldn't help it. I met a very powerful guy. In order to not be discovered by him, I had to be extremely careful. That's why I wasted a lot of time." "A powerful guy?" When Andre heard this, he immediately raised his head, an expression of surprise appearing on his face. He knew better than anyone else the other party's fighting ability. A person who could make even the big-breasted lowly feel apprehensive was definitely above level 10, or even higher. That's right, male about 50 years old, with frighteningly thick arms. If I'm not mistaken, he should be a level 15 warrior with the ape arm specialty. In addition, we've already found out where the other party is hiding. It's in a cave not far from the outskirts. With our current strength, I'm afraid we won't be able to pose a threat to them. Oh, right. I vaguely heard them call their organization the Black Blade. In the process of her statement, Bosha had changed from her usual cheerful appearance to a serious one that made people feel uncomfortable. Black Blade? Level 15 warrior? It seems that the other party's strength is much more robust than I thought. But don't worry, we don't need to directly meet them head-on. Oftentimes, using intelligence is the best way to solve problems. Saying this, the corners of Andre's mouth rose slightly, revealing a playful smile. Without a doubt, he decided to use the high-ranking leaders of the Shadow Web as cannon fodder to break through enemy lines. On one hand, he'd have an idea of the resources in the hands of these feet, and, on the other, he'd be able to probe the strength of the mysterious organization in Valen City, killing two birds with one stone, while also being able to hide behind the scenes and reap the benefits. Why not? Bosha stared suspiciously at Andre, and only opened her mouth after half a minute. What crazy plan have you come up with this time? Why are you smiling so sinisterly? I have to remind you that Jess is still in the hands of the other party. This guy knows quite a bit about our plan. If you don't save him quickly, the consequences are likely to be very serious. Don't worry. Everything is within my expectations. At least it's not out of control yet. All right, let's all go to sleep. I need a rest as well. I still have an important meeting to attend after daybreak. Andre didn't reveal too many details, and only smiled mysteriously at the big-breasted lowly before walking towards the basement. Staring at his back, Bosha clenched her teeth and cursed. Damn it. I hate this feeling of being kept in the dark. He's definitely hiding some secret. Just wait and see. One day I'll be able to expose all his tricks. Looking at the halfling's angry appearance, Fiona pursed her lips and comforted her with a smile. Don't worry, it's not the first day you've met him. Anyway, it's fine as long as the final result is beneficial to us. Let's go and rest. After all, lack of sleep is a woman's greatest enemy. All right, what you said makes sense. But I have to take a shower before going to bed. Otherwise, the smell of sweat on my body will be a little uncomfortable. While speaking, Bosha began to take off the armor and leather armor on her body. After a few seconds, she was only left with a pair of thin, tight-fitting shorts. Since the two men had already entered the basement, she didn't have any scruples. Especially the two huge, white balls of weapons, which simply made one's blood boil. Wow, what an enviable upper body. Come, let me pinch it to see if it's fake. Fiona laughed and pounced on her. Soon, the two women rolled together and played around. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.